Welcome to this video edition of Where Did the Road Go? And I'm here with the brothers of the Serpent, or the Snake Brothers, or Snake 1 and Snake 2.
Glad to be back, as always.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Yep.
I believe it's like Kyle and Russ or something like that I hear sometimes.
Something like that.
It's Russ and Kyle.
Russ, oh, okay.
Get it right, Soraya.
So I've literally never seen you guys when we start a podcast, and since we were doing video, we had cameras on for a moment, and I saw you in your studio, and there were no masks, and I was very disappointed.
Wait, what kind of mask?
Wrestling masks. Snake 1 and Snake 2.
Okay.
Gotta have some luchador masks. You're right down there in Texas.
I have a luchador mask.
See? Now I sort of know what you look like.
Yeah. Now we'll be able to recognize each other at a coffee shop. See, that's the key right there.
Actually, no, I'm face blind.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be able to recognize you, which is good because I'm still trying to get together. You know, we're going to come up there and visit you sometime. So
that would be amazing.
We're going to crash your studio.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. It'll happen. I'm working on it.
It was going to happen way back pre-COVID.
Yeah. I'm gonna jam some death metal, dude.
Hell, you could come out and play,
blow your mind.
$50 Dynasty stuff in our studio, and that would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, if both of us are able to make it up there, we'll definitely bring at least acoustic guitar and a drum, and we can rock out in the studio and play some stuff.
Right.
It'll be acoustic version. Not, it won't be metal.
That's fine.
Hard to do metal with an acoustic guitar, and
it's metal. It's just
happens.
made of wood.
It's metal made of wood.
So you have this presentation on Egypt.
Yes. So first of all, I'd like to say to all the Where Did the Road Go listeners out there, I know you guys are listeners. So I apologize that, this is going to be a very visual presentation. So listening to it may be difficult, but I'll try to keep it so that listeners can keep up. But really, there's 180 slides in this presentation, and we're going to be pointing out stuff that is you have to see to really understand what's going on. So if you listen to it, you'll be able to kind of get the overall gist of what we're talking about, but you won't be able to see the details in the images, and that's really important. This is just one of the, because our show is also, we have listeners, not watchers.
Right. You have a watcher.
Yeah, we do have a watcher, but people who listen to our show usually get mad when we post video episodes. So I apologize to all of the Where Did the Road Go people who are like, why are you making a video episode?
Well, the video will obviously be available, so they can go watch the video. As I told you guys before we started, I finally have started listening to Cosmographia.
Yeah.
That you do with Randall Carlson, and you do video slides there occasionally.
That's right.
And it's totally listenable on just the audio, because that's all I've been doing. But every once in a while, I'm like, I want to see that.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Need to see that. What is he talking about? Yeah.
It's not even what is he talking about. I can picture it, but I want to actually see it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like that's how this is going to go. There's going to be stuff that, for the most part, you don't need the video, but there are going to be times where people are probably going to want the video.
Right. So the video will be available. We're recording it in 3 or 4 different ways, so it will work out somehow. So basically, this presentation, most of the vast majority of the images are from our trip from Egypt that we did last year in October, and some of them I got to fill out some stuff that I didn't have images of. I got from Ben from over at Uncharted X, which if anybody listening is not familiar with his channel, you should definitely go over there and check it out. Ben does great work on this kind of stuff, and he has fantastic images and video. So,
and for anyone who's not aware, Egypt is a continent in the Pacific Ocean.
So, yeah, I don't even know what to say to that. So we're going to go, we're going to start here. This is a Google Earth image. You're looking down at the Giza Plateau. These are the 3 familiar pyramids. I don't know why that day-night line is there, but anyway,
it's the shadow of a UFO.
That's right. That's the UFO crossing over the plateau. But everybody's more familiar with the Great Pyramid, and even the second one, the Pyramid of Khafre. And I use these terms because that's what they're called. These are the names of the pharaohs that are associated with them. But the one in the middle is Khafre's pyramid. the second pyramid. The one on the upper right is the Great Pyramid, and the one on the lower left there, the small one, is the Pyramid of Mankare. That's the one we're going to take a look at today. It's the least popular pyramid on the plateau. But when we were here, I asked Ben if we could go over and look at this one because there was something on the outside that I wanted to look at specifically. So this is a view of the outside of that pyramid, and you can see the casing stones here. There's a few of them left on the pyramid itself. And they're made of granite. So unlike the other two large pyramids on the plateau, these casing stones are unique. They're actually made of granite from the Aswan Quarry.
What were the other ones made of?
They're Tura limestone, very high quality limestone, almost like a kind of chert, very silica heavy, so it's hard and beautiful limestone. The core blocks back here behind the casing stones, these are just regular limestone, and you can see that they're basically kind of degrading, right, over time. And so what's interesting, there's a couple of things I want to bring up here before we completely dive into this. Number one, walking around in Egypt is something that you begin to see that you're looking through thousands of years of cultural layers. And that's part of unraveling the mystery, and it takes a while, of course. Now I know that, people from Europe are more used to seeing things that are that old, or at least 1,000 years old or whatever. But for those of us, over here in Texas and America, the oldest building you might come across is going to be a couple hundred years old. Right. But in Egypt, especially, you're looking at, this is one of the oldest civilizations on the planet. One of them, and there's so much layers that you're looking through. So you can see just in this image, the pathway leading up to it. This is modern. The rails on the side here are modern. This structure here in the front could be New Kingdom. And it's got layers on it. You can see that there's been repairs above, and then there's finer work below.
What is that structure?
What is it?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. It's just a crumbled ruin there.
Okay.
And you see this all over the place, and a lot of times it's just not explained. There's just a square foundation with some bricks or blocks or whatever, and it's sometimes the guides will tell you like, okay, that's Old Kingdom work, or it's Middle Kingdom work, or it's New Kingdom, but it's, there's just too many details to really take it all in. The other thing you'll notice here in this picture is all the rubble around the outside of the pyramid here. These are the remains of the granite casing stones that are still here. And the reason they're rubble like this is because people were actually quarrying those granite blocks off of this pyramid.
Right. So
the source of this granite is like 500 miles away from here. So if you're a person who needs granite, this is a lot, and you're in the area, this is a lot closer than the quarry where you would quarry it out of the ground.
And they already have flat faces and stuff that you can use.
They've already been cut into convenient shapes, and like Kyle said, they already have finished surfaces. And we'll actually see some of that. A lot of times these people they're cutting blocks out for other buildings, or they're making millstones sometimes. There's actually an unfinished millstone we'll see in these pictures. Okay, so another thing we noticed with pyramids is that the casing stones act as, think of it as the roof tiling. So on your house, you have your roof, and then on the roof are some kind of roofing tiles, whether they're, the regular tiles with the tar and the gravel on them. And think of that, the gravel on the tile, on a regular roof tile or roof shingle is going to be a granite type of gravel. Or maybe you have, actual tiles of some kind, or maybe a metal roof or whatever. But the point is that roofing is supposed to protect the rest of the structure from the elements. If you went up there and you peeled the shingles or whatever it is on your roof off of the roof, then the rest of the structure would immediately begin to degrade. The rain, the wind, just the elements would start to tear it apart. So that's what's happened to these pyramids, is that when people came in and started, or earthquakes or whatever happened, and people started peeling the roofing off of the pyramids, the interior structure began to fall apart slowly. But the reason I wanted to go to Mankare, this pyramid, is I wanted to see this section right here. I'm going to see if I can zoom in on it a bit. right here near the entrance, you'll notice that there's a difference in the way the stones look right here. So let's go forward here and take a look at that. If I can. Here we go. All right, so now I'm closer, and this gives you the scale of these casing stones. So again, you'll notice that these aren't small blocks. They're huge, and what's interesting is that they're kind of rough on the front face. You know, they look a little bit unfinished, right? They're I don't know, puffy or pillowy. Kyle and I kind of landed on pillowy as
pillowy.
Yeah. But you can see, if you look up here at where we can see the interior sides of some of the casing stones, that they were flattened quite precisely to fit up against each other. It's just the exterior part, the part that's sticking out from the pyramid, that's sort of unfinished, has this unfinished or pillowy or puffy look.
It's almost like they had the technology to make the rocks soft somehow so they could fit them in perfectly with everything else. It
does kind of look like that, and it's softening granite is, I have no idea, you know. I mean, maybe it's a possibility. But one of the things that happens when I go through this presentation is people want to ask, you know, what are the tools? What are the methods? I don't know. There's many possibilities, but the point of this presentation really is to show you that when you're walking through Egypt, you get to see buildings in multiple stages of construction. Some things have been completed, other things haven't been completed, other things have been completed and then they're falling apart. So you kind of get to see inside the way it's built, and that helps you sort of put together a bigger picture, and also to see similar styles and tool marks across the entire country, and also then that helps you recognize them elsewhere in the world, which we'll get into near the end here. So, and I know you've Soraya, and many of your listeners have seen images of Peru, right? Doesn't this kind of remind you of what you see down in Peru? The sort of
yes,
right? It's got the same quality, except that in this case, the difference is that there's consistent horizontal lines.
Right. I was going to say in Peru, they're jigsawed together, but that's also to make them earthquake proof.
This is also jigsawed together. The difference is that there are definite layers.
Okay.
So when they're like, if you look at the core masonry of the pyramid itself, it's built in layers. Right. So these casing stones are matching with the courses of the pyramid beneath.
Right. But you'll notice
from side to side, they're very different.
Yeah, you'll notice if you look at just any set of blocks here that even though, you know, they're all sort of the same height, that they're all very different in width.
Yeah.
So it does have the quality of the sort of jigsaw, except for the horizontal layering.
Well, I mean, but if you look at Peru, they'll come out and then they'll go down and then the next piece. So they fit together like puzzle pieces differently than this.
Yes.
And and they'll withstand earthquakes, which Egypt is not something, you know, an area that has a lot of tectonic activity. So
right. But there have been earthquakes that did damage the pyramids on the plateau. Yeah. And we'll see some of this when we're looking a little bit later at the Valley Temple. You'll see more Peruvian style, where there isn't like a common horizontal line in a lot of this work. But again, let's remember that what we're looking at here is granite. So this is a very hard stone and difficult to work. Okay. And then you'll also notice the nubs. You know, here's a row of them going across the top here.
Yeah.
And I'm using my pointer here to point it out. And then there's also interesting other features, like there's some notches. This one has a couple like reverse nubs or notches underneath the block.
Are they always on the bottom like that?
Not always, but a lot of the times, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. This is just another view. And this is showing you, like, you can see these interesting, sometimes you see these interesting patterns. Like this, there's these scoop mark type things on these lower stones. Like here's one right here. And we'll see more of that as we go along. Here's another great, like, look how, you know, this is, again, I'm getting closer to the blocks and you can see how far they extrude out from where they actually are matching with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, in some cases, there's more than 12 inches of material sticking out of each block from where they actually join with the other blocks in the in the structure itself. And I'm trying to show you how tall this is, right? So we're all standing here, and I'm having to look up, because again, we're looking at a pyramid, so it's steeply sloped, and I'm looking up at these blocks. So most people come up, when somebody's standing next to it, they come up, the top of their head comes up to the top of the third case, or maybe the fourth. Look at this block down at the ground here. So this block has what looks like the remnants of very large nubs at the bottom of it, and don't they kind of look like they've been sheared flat here?
Yeah, like then weathered down.
Yes, right? So in some cases, we would see a block like this that had nubs that were like that, but they would extrude out over like a foot, 10 inches to 12 inches. But these look like they've just been cut off. So this is another, I'm just bringing this up because this is another thing we'll recognize as we go through multiple sites. You'll see that there's this interesting thing with where the nubs are. And yeah. Here's another one. Look at the corner here. So like they've been removing material.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to look. Okay, yeah, here's some of the reverse notches at the bottoms. There's one there and one there. There's a set on this next block.
Could that be explained by weathering?
It could. I mean,
well, there are other places where they're definitely on purpose.
Yeah.
And so
sharply cut. Yeah.
It looks.
I would also.
Go ahead.
I guess I would also think the weathering would be more on the top than the bottom.
Yeah, I think when you're thinking of weathering, what I think of weathering, looking at this image, it's the entire surface of the stone is weathered. It's not smooth. It's a rough, grainy. You can see the individual crystals of the stone, but those notches look intentional to me, and based on a lot of other places where we saw them, that they were definitely intentional, like in the lids of a box, for example.
Yes, we'll see some of that.
So you can recognize them.
Okay.
There's a set. Pretty clear.
Yeah.
And again, note how very rough the face of these blocks are. Like almost like the builders didn't really care too much about the shape of the front face of these blocks. This one has like this big bulge on it right here. But when we get to the area around the entrance, I'm going to kind of skip through some of these here. Well, I guess I'll mention this. I took this image to show you how finely done the edges of the blocks are where they're intended to sit against each other. So in contrast to these front faces of the blocks that are very rough or pillowy or puffy or whatever, these edges where they're sitting against each other are very flat and smooth.
And contoured to match each other.
Yes, often they have a contour. Like they're not perfectly flat. They're contoured to match a reverse or mirror contour on the block next to them.
And that's as high up as the casing stones go?
Yes, this is the remnant. And the other thing I'll say real quick, because this is interesting, is that when you come up here, what the guides will tell you is that the reason these casing stones are still here is because the rubble from the quarrying of the casing stones above this area covered this part of the pyramid. Sand and rubble.
Buried it.
Just completely buried it, so it wasn't worth it to whoever was quarrying the rocks to dig out. So when the archaeologists came along and they cleared out all the rubble, then we have these casing stones left.
Nice. Yeah. Honestly, at this point, I find the other two pyramids more interesting than the Great Pyramid, just because we never hear about them.
Right. And this is one of the most fascinating aspects of the three pyramids on the plateau to me, and it's this particular spot right here that we're looking at right here that I wanted to see in particular. So what we're looking at is an image of the entrance, and this is on the north face of the pyramid, and you can see how they did flatten and clean up these blocks right around the entrance here.
Yeah.
And so look, you can see that some of these blocks, like this one up here at the top, it's got this section at the end where they just didn't clean it off, right? And they dug out a lot of material to make this flat face right here by this entrance. And then you can also see that the line going down across the the courses of blocks is basically a common line. Like it looks like somebody came in here with a giant belt sander or something and just flattened this part and removed 8 to 12 inches of hard granite.
And this is the
Tons
original
of
entrance.
granite.
This wasn't something we blew into like we did with the Great Pyramid.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it did have an entrance prism door or something like that right there that's gone now. You can see it's
But not in modern times.
Yeah, but not in modern times, right. But what the point is that whoever put these casing stones on here flattened this area, and the way that the rest of it kind of looks to me, this is what I thought, and there's no way to prove this, but it kind of looks to me like they intended to do this to the entire set of casing stones. That's why they didn't care really about the face of the casing stones elsewhere. They're all puffy and everything, because what that does is it allows you to do the construction in a way where if the stones get damaged if that face gets damaged while you're doing the construction, it's not that big of a deal, because you're going to take off all this material anyway to have the finished product.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
So the question is, did they intend to do this flattening, like we see here, to the entire rest of the pyramid, and they never got to it? And then if that's the case, the question is what made them stop working?
Right.
And as we go through this presentation, there's multiple sites around Egypt where you see this is the case, where it looks like somebody had a big building project and they were almost finished, and they were clearly in the process of doing what you would think of as the finishing work, sort of like painting the walls inside the house kind of thing, right? And they just didn't complete it. So this is another image of the same flattened area. It's a clearer image. And then you can see, like, people will notice that there's a very rough set of hieroglyphs right here. This is 19th dynasty. So basically, this is graffiti. Even according to the standard model archaeologists, this is not contemporary with the building of the structure itself.
Right.
There is no normal, like contemporary writing on this structure. That's the other interesting thing about it. But somebody did come along in the 19th dynasty and make this block of text. Here's the other side.
Howard Weiss didn't get in there and write some stuff?
Well, he would have been painting, right?
All right, good point.
It's hard to carve on granite, and you can see how rough these are.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Well, this also gives you an indication of how much the granite has deteriorated as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that writing is obscured by deterioration on the surface of these blocks. They're still flat, but they're rough.
Yeah. That's the other thing I would point out about this particular kind of granite that you see all over Egypt, this stuff from Aswan, is it's, like Kyle said, it's large grain. You can see individual crystals. A lot of times they're the size of your fingernails, right? So that makes it difficult to work with, that large grain granite. To make it smooth and polished is not an easy project. So here's the other side to the right of the door, and you can see the same thing. They're coming along and just smoothing out these blocks in a square around the entrance. And whatever tool they were using, or whatever process or method, they didn't seem to care where the blocks started and stopped. Right? What they wanted was a square space that was cleared off.
And the thing about these curves at the edges of the flattening that is significant to me is it may be indicative of the shape of the tool that they were using to flatten it. So it's possible that the tool itself had a radius that matches the edges of the rocks where they stopped. So you can see that curve coming up where it goes to the original face of the rock.
Yeah, there's a radius there.
Which makes you wonder what kind of tool they were using.
A big grinding tool or something like that. I don't know.
Again, here you can see that kind of similar radius across that just crosses the blocks. This is the other thing I'll point out here. I love this. We were talking about how you can see this join here where the block goes around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Now you see this all over Egypt, and it's so fascinating. They're working with these enormous blocks that weigh multiple tons, sometimes tens of or hundreds of tons, and then there'll be this little bitty detail where the block goes down like a half an inch into the block below it, a half inch more than the one next to it. And it's just that kind of detail where, right? So, like you were saying, Soraya, in Peru, you see that there's the heterogeneous nature of the stonework doesn't leave any noticeable horizontal lines. But here, they're actually compensating for that maybe by giving this little notch.
Yeah.
In the horizontal line. You can't even see it until the blocks have been flattened.
Now this block on the bottom, is that running over the block underneath? Is that why it's curved like that?
This curve is actually the bottom of the cutout. So this is actually just sticking out farther.
Oh,
sticking out towards you.
Sticking out upwards, yeah. Remember, everything is tilted too because it's the side of the pyramid. So yeah, you can see how this is the bottom of the flattened area.
Brought it back, I can see.
Yeah.
Huh.
But yeah, I love these little bitty tiny notches in this enormous stonework. It's like the attention to detail is fascinating.
Well, also, it's not something that's really hard to do.
Yes.
Even for us, that would be hard to do. So
yeah, it makes the job way more difficult.
An easier way of doing it than we do.
It does seem that way. Here's another one. I'll just point it out here. You can see it. The block. Yeah. Is this the same one? Yeah. Maybe it is the same one. Yeah. So when you go around the east side of the pyramid, is it the east side? Let's see. It's facing north. We go around. I think it's the east side. We walked around the side of the pyramid. There's another flattened square.
Yeah, it's the east side.
Yeah. Now this one doesn't have a door in it, but it does have what looks sort of like a keystone block that is upside down. But there's no door here. But there's another flattened square on this side of the pyramid.
Yet if you were going to do it all the way around, why stop on one side? Unless you had two different groups doing it, and they both stopped at the same time.
Yeah, I had a thought about this. Like, if they were casing the entire pyramid in this granite, and they needed a flat surface at the specific angle that they wanted the whole side of the pyramid to be as they were stacking the blocks up, they could flatten an area like this and use it as a reference point for the angle going all the way up, and making sure that the blocks as they stacked up stuck out far enough and that the joints on the sides were in the right position so that when they flattened it, there wouldn't be any voids.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to explain, but if you imagine you're working your way up the pyramid and you're setting blocks, but they're all so pillowy, how do you measure? How do you would need a reference point to know how far out they need to stick so that when you do flatten them to that angle, there's not going to be any like big cracks or something where you didn't fit the block far enough out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's a possibility. It's totally just a hypothesis. I don't even know how you would test it. It's just thinking about using this as a method for building.
Yeah. So one scenario is like, if I was the contractor, I would you'd have a north face crew and a east face crew and a south face crew and a west face crew, and they would be responsible for facing the side of the pyramid on their end. So each one of them would need a survey square, and at the base of the pyramid where you can kind of do the reference, and then the intention is to go and smooth out the entire all four sides like this all the way to the top. But for some reason, the job wasn't completed.
Yeah.
And again, I'll point out just quickly here on some of these blocks to the side, because where the shadows are better on this end, that you can kind of see these interesting scoop style marks. This one's got a big one going horizontally across it. And you can see these divots out here, up and down. Right. Here's a pile of rubble. And again, you can see that the clean faces, this is usually what the people who were quarrying this stuff off the pyramid were after, they were after the granite, but also the fact that it's way easier to take a block that's already been cut out, where you don't have, there's a lot less work you have to do if you've already got clean faces cut.
So you said, here's a pile of rubble, and my brain kind of went, so this is just a bunch of garbage. You're showing us garbage is what you're doing.
It is a picture of garbage. So this is another overhead view from Google Earth. This is the north side. This is where the entrance was, and we walked around, and you could see these areas here. This is the granite rubble that was cleared away from the sides of the pyramid, and you can see it's kind of scattered all the way around it, the whole thing. So now what we're doing is we're walking around the east side here, and we're going to look at this structure, which would be...
Now, from this picture, the pyramid doesn't look like it's equal on all sides. Is that just the angle?
That's just Google Earth.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I couldn't, I would have taken this picture myself, but I wasn't able to get up there. Egypt is pretty serious about not allowing drones.
Really?
Yeah, they're very serious about it. If you show up in Cairo airport with a drone, they will take it from you and also question you for a couple of hours. So,
so nowhere in Egypt?
You better have special permits and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. That's because they don't want you to see the stuff they don't want you to see.
Yeah. Well, they tell you it's the military, but that's the story. It's the military because the military has bases around these areas and they don't want you flying your drone and taking pictures of their... Anyway.
Also stuff they don't want you to see.
Right. Yes. It's stuff they don't want you to see. So this is the view from the ground of that structure. This is the supposedly the pyramid / mortuary temple of Mankare.
Okay.
This is made of limestone. Some of the blocks are absolutely gigantic. You can see this one is a monster right here. And there's lots of interesting things we could talk about on this. The patterns of erosion that you see here. Like, look how very degraded these blocks are on the top. Heavily, like almost spongy.
Yeah.
And then there's these lines going across this block and here and here. And some of this we were told, and this kind of makes sense, is that for a long time that tells you where the sand level was. So the thing was buried in sand up to this point. And so the constant wind-blown sand that goes across the surface of the dunes just at ground level will just erode these huge divots out of the blocks, make these big indents.
Yeah.
So that kind of shows you the level it was buried in. So we go into this temple, and this is the next bit. This is where that particular temple or structure connects to the casing stones of the pyramid. And this is, this was an interesting thing for me. Kyle and I have gone back and forth over
This is where I disagree with Russ no matter what theory he proposes.
Every time we do this presentation, I try to say something different, and then he still disagrees with whatever I said. So what I first thought was, I was like, this is a crap job. This is a terrible job of connecting, when you're looking at the amazing setup of the pyramid itself and the casing stones and how fine the joints are and everything, and then you see this, you're just like, I don't know, man, this doesn't look like the same. What it looks to me like is somebody much later came along and built a completely different structure, and they had totally different builders, and they just sort of jammed this thing up against the pyramid.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking of is, if the original builders of the pyramid, or the people who were putting these casing stones on, intended to flatten them, to smooth them out over the entire thing, well, they didn't finish the job, but somebody butted these walls of this temple up against the pyramid on the unflattened casing stones. So that may imply a second stage of construction. In other words, that this structure here is not part of the original concept of the pyramid itself, that it was built later by different people. Now, it's possible that it was intended to be. Kyle has pointed out that if you came along after doing a rough join like this, if you came along and flattened everything out, including the granite and the limestone of the temple itself, that you would end up with an interesting and much smoother looking join where the blocks would appear to go around corners. That's possible. But the point is that this whole area right here, I just wonder about this join. I'm just not sure. To me, it seems like
it doesn't look like the same builders,
right?
Yeah.
Maybe there was, different guys that do the limestone work, and then there was maybe there was a crew that was specifically granite, and that was their thing, and it was like really fine finish work. I don't know, but it doesn't look to be the same quality work, even though the limestone clearly would degrade much more over time than the granite would.
Yeah.
And I guess that could be a factor.
True.
Also, here's a millstone. Somebody was making a millstone out of one of the granite casing stones, and it's still here.
Huh.
On the ground there. Unfinished millstone. There it is. So again, you can see this, I'll just point out again, the roughness of this join here, and it just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't strike me as the same quality.
No, not at all. It looks like two complete. Like you said, it looks like someone just slapped this together afterwards.
Right. Yes.
Now you do see the joints that, again, like you see the little notch in some of these giant boulders of limestone where they're just notched around the corner right there on that one. That's also not easy to do. So it's, you see some of the same elements, but again, the workmanship, the quality is just not.
It just doesn't. It doesn't hold up. And again, I'll point out, you can see the way these stones on the side of the pyramid here are scooped. And there's nubs up here up high. Okay. So when you get inside of that limestone structure, this mortuary temple or pyramid temple of Mankare, you see that, yes, the blocks they were using were huge. These are some enormous blocks, and again, they're heavily eroded up here at the top, and the structure's almost completely gone. It's
and you can see these
not much left.
All these little sort of squarish notches all around on the on the faces of the bottom blocks there that hadn't been exposed to the sand and the wind and stuff.
Yes. So you'll see this pattern of, like Kyle's pointing out, this pattern of squares and other things interesting on the blocks at the bottom here. And what that probably is, let me skip forward, is this. It was to facilitate these blocks. There's a section of this remaining in one hallway, maybe two hallways, where somebody clearly came along. What appears that, I shouldn't say clearly. What it appears like is that somebody else came along after this limestone structure was already kind of eroded, and they started fitting these granite or whatever this stone is. What is this? Diorite?
It definitely looks more modern.
Diorite, yeah, but these aren't. They're old. But yes, this style is totally different, right? The face the interior face is flattened out and smooth, and where they left the corners sort of bulging out, it does look kind of Roman. The Romans did stonework like this,
with the corners bulging out.
Yes,
like this?
Yeah, you see this in.
I don't remember seeing any of that.
Yeah, you kind of see it with Roman stonework.
I didn't. Well, it probably wasn't when I was in Rome, but I didn't really pay attention to specifics on the stonework.
I don't know if it's Roman or not. I'm just saying that you do see this kind of style in other places where they flatten the interior of the block. But the point is, this looks like another stage of construction is the point. So somebody came along after the pyramid was not completed, and then they built this limestone structure up against it, and then that had time to sort of erode and start falling apart, and then somebody else came along and cased the interior and possibly part of the exterior with these diorite blocks.
Yeah, and so just say it again, the squarish faces that you see on the lower limestone blocks in the other opening may have been places where they prepared that limestone face for the granite block to go up against it, and that granite has since been quarried out of this structure.
It's been taken, so you can see it in the back here. You can see the sort of square faces, these areas where it looks like they were flattening. But yeah, the joinery here is interesting. The stonework, the style is just
some nubs
different. Yeah,
it looks like giant concrete blocks like we have today.
It does, but I'm pretty sure this is the kind of black diorite that the Serapeum blocks are made of.
Oh, okay. I'm just saying, like the way it's placed together, it looks like the side of the type of concrete blocks that have two holes in them.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at the side there, it just looks like those were just put there and cemented together. Of course, they're much bigger. You can't always, until you're showing like this person in the picture and stuff.
Yeah.
You can't really tell the size.
That's one of our men in black.
Right there. Excellent.
Yeah, everywhere we went in Egypt, we had two of these guys with us.
Only two? Usually there's three.
Yeah, they were cool. They're guards of a kind.
Right. Right.
Yeah. No, I called them the Men in Black. Wearing suits out there in the desert in the heat of Egypt was amazing.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is just, and you can kind of see that there's this definitely looks like chisel marks here on the limestone. But you can see, again, that the limestone itself appears to have been in a kind of degraded state before they installed these stones.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, I guess the point I'm getting at here is how many stages of construction with how much time in between each stage are we looking at here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you start out with the casing stones on the pyramid appearing to have, the intention appears to have been, let's flatten the whole thing, and they just didn't complete it.
Right.
Right. All right. Now we're back up on the Giza Plateau. This is the basalt platform in front of the Great Pyramid. Now it's the pavement here. This basalt is cracked and damaged, but it's still amazingly flat. Look how beautiful that is. And these are fit. And it's hard to tell when you're looking at this. So this is an area where you can look past the basalt itself and see some of the limestone below. And in some cases, you'll be looking at actual bedrock limestone. In other cases, like right here, you're looking at a limestone tile. Right? Okay. So again, we're looking at layers here, and you just wonder how many layers are there. And clearly some of this is mortar. And we know that, the Ministry of Antiquities has come through here and tried to clean things up. You can kind of see their handiwork all over the plateau as well. So it's tough to tell, like, what are we looking at that's modern, ancient, and very, very ancient. But the idea that you get is that somebody, when they were doing the pyramid construction, but flattened the Giza Plateau out in some areas. They completely flattened it. And then somebody, either the same people or somebody else later, tiled the plateau in huge limestone tiles. Some of them were absolutely enormous. You could take multiple steps to cross one tile.
Huh.
And they're thick, so many tons. A single tile could be multiple tons.
Which could make sense in a way with limestone bedrock, because you just never know when you're going to hit a really soft spot that's like chalk. It just wears away with the rain or wind and sand erosion. Some of it can be full of holes. Some of it can be like really crumbly and just basically turns into sand.
Yeah, so you dig out those parts and then put tiles in there of higher quality stuff. But then somebody came along, or the same people or whatever, and tiled this area in basalt, which is a totally different kind of stone.
Extremely hard.
Very hard, volcanic stone. And I mean, when you're looking at the bottom of these basalt tiles, we don't know how much of this is just damage that's been repaired in modern times or even in ancient times, but it looks like in some cases that whoever put the basalt tiles here were matching or close or sort of matching the bottoms of the tiles to the already eroded areas of the limestone tiles. So again, how many stages of construction are we talking about? And how much time in between each one? Here's more looking on edge onto the basalt tiles, and you can see it. And great, this is a saw mark. These are all over the basalt.
Now, why would there be a saw mark there?
Well, it looks like the people were the way that they were cutting the tiles, and it looks like they were using power tools.
So who was it that did the work with the sonic drills?
Christopher Dunn kind of did some work into the sonic drilling ideas.
Well, I know someone said that they were trying to match the cutting patterns to drills.
Yes.
And the only thing that they matched up to were modern sonic drills.
Yeah, we interviewed a guy named Jeffrey Appling, who was a jeweler, who did some of that on a small scale. And he was able to use a kind of ultrasonic tool to cut through very hard stones very easily with irregular shaped bits,
But it wasn't just that he could cut through them. Whoever was doing the research said that the drill pattern did not match, because of how fast they cut and stuff.
Right. I think that's Chris Dunn.
Yeah.
Okay. He does not think it's sonic drilling. He did a lot of work on the sonic drilling, and Based on the patterns in core number 7, whatever, they could not get it to match, so it had to be. He thinks it had to be some other way.
Huh.
So here's more. This is the basalt up at the top, and these are limestone tiles below. Maybe multiple layers of them, or this could be bedrock down here at the bottom. So this video, let me stop this real quick. This video is of Kyle. Kyle took this. It's real short, but it's basically just showing you. Why don't you explain what this is?
Well, these 2 blocks are basically, there's nothing around them that's still in situ or still where it's supposed to be. So these are 2 of the basalt blocks, and they're so level on the top, and they match the rest of the floor. I just found it amazing, like after however many thousands of years, that they're still sitting here and how flat they are. So I was trying to kind of illustrate.
Yeah, so I'll let this play a bit as he walks around it. And then bam.
Huh. Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah. It's amazing. You can just really see how high quality this work is, that surface still matches the rest of the flooring. And then again, you can kind of see how thick this tiling is.
Yeah. And it's like this whole section is just like a little island. Everything else is eroded away, but the stuff that's still there is perfect.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let me skip ahead here. So now we're in the Valley Temple. So this is what. So after seeing some of the other granite work over there at Mankare, and that you get the idea of what it looks like when it's unfinished. This, on the other hand, looks like a finished product with the granite, at least. Now you can start to imagine that when they were installing these blocks, that all the exterior or outside facing surfaces might have been pillowy or puffy. But then somebody came along and smoothed them out flat after the work was done, which is what, so you get interesting effects from that. And it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a line. Now what we're doing is I'm looking down a hallway that sort of ends, and it's got this high alcove in it, but the interior corners of these hallways and these inside corners, there's a line that goes all the way down, and you can see that it's continuous when you're there. It's hard to see.
It's a tool mark line.
Yeah, it's a tool mark that there's an actual radius there. It's not a perfectly sharp corner. That there's actually a slight curve.
Oh, okay.
So what you imagine is that you build these walls all the way up, and the interior surfaces are sort of puffy or whatever. And then you stand on top of the block walls and you drill 4 holes where you want the corners to be. And then your facing guys come in and clean off all the granite until they reach those drill holes. And then you have this hallway.
Huh.
And that's why you end up with these corners where you can see what looks like a drill line radius going all the way from the top of the block wall to the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, my video game mind says, got to get up to that alcove.
Yes, I totally agree. There were a lot of moments like that where you're like, if this was a game, I would have to climb up there. Yeah.
Or levitate.
Right. Look at this block next to this guy behind him here.
Oh my God.
This is a monster. And then this one on the side of the doorway. These are just absolutely gigantic. And you can see
where is this in relation to the pyramids?
This is the Valley Temple, so it's closer to the Sphinx.
Okay. But still on the Giza Plateau.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
This is right next to the Sphinx Temple. This is not the Sphinx Temple. It's the Valley Temple, so it's kind of next to it. So it's close to the Sphinx, farther away from the pyramids, but up on the plateau. Yeah. And I don't know. To me, the stonework in here is very similar to what we see on the casing stones of the Mankare pyramid. It's these granite blocks that have this heterogeneous character that have been flattened out. They pretty much finished this job. But again, you'll notice, and I'm sure many of your listeners have heard people talk about this, that in the background of these pictures are these immense core limestone blocks. In other words, this granite has been faced against these gigantic limestone blocks that are up in the background. You can only see them up high, though.
What's interesting is this doesn't seem to have any rain weathering on it.
Well, yeah, it's hard to tell.
Well, I mean, look at the body of the Sphinx and how weathered it is.
Right.
Which would suggest to me that this was newer than the Sphinx.
Well, it's also granite.
True.
It's granite. I'll show you some weathering. There is weathering. It's just harder to see. But yeah, this stuff was probably very smooth at the time this was finished, and it's rough now because of weathering.
But like the limestone, the large limestone blocks we were showing by the Mankare pyramid, they're very weathered, like the Sphinx, even more so.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
So here you can kind of see what we were talking about with the corner line. This sort of white line that goes all the way down. Yeah, it goes all the way down. And see this block right here at the bottom goes around the corner.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? And there's this sort of radius drill line that goes all the way to the top of the wall through all the blocks. It's a continuous thing. So here's what I'm doing here, and this is still in the Valley Temple. I'm showing you how fine the joints were. This is a vertical joint right here, and then a horizontal one. I'm putting my hand up there so you can see it.
You can barely even see the joint to begin with.
Right. It's so fine that it's almost invisible. It's absolutely unbelievably amazing how fine these joints were. And these blocks, again, are gigantic. You know, so whoever was doing this stonework they were absolute masters of their craft. And another thing you can see here is how weathered this is. You know, the granite is basically decomposing. It's falling apart. You know, but with granite, that's a much slower process. But clearly, a lot of time and damage has been done to this granite, and it's slowly falling apart. It's decomposing on the outside here.
It almost looks like there's a minuscule layer of mortar in there too. That's because it's still like sticking out.
Yeah, it does. I've wondered about this.
Or is it just seepage of water? Or
seepage
something?
And crystal growth in between the stones. Yeah, I don't know. I have noticed that as well. And this is another picture. So this is an outside corner. So these blocks are going around, and you can almost the only way you can see this joint is by following the line of the join past it. It's almost invisible right here, or you could see it if you paid attention to how the crystals end in a line right here. But yeah, this is an outside corner, right? So it's sticking out towards us. And you can again see how heavily eroded this granite is. It's falling apart.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And how long does it take that to happen to granite? A long time.
Well, also, it's going to depend on what the weather is in that time period. So
yes,
it's probably not going to deteriorate so much once Egypt gets dry, but when Egypt was wet, it's going to deteriorate quicker. But we don't know the exact dates on all that stuff.
That's right. So I was trying to get images of where the granite is matched up against the core blocks of the limestone. This is one. It's tough to get good pictures of it, but you can see how, again, it seems like possibly that whoever put the granite up in the Valley Temple was matching it to already damaged and eroded limestone core blocks.
Yeah.
So again, you start to wonder, like, how many stages of construction are we talking about here, and how long does it take for, the erosion to take place? All right. So now we're going to leave the Giza Plateau. We're going to go down the Nile, which would be, this is up the Nile, upriver, down south towards the Osirion. This is like 300 miles upriver. So this is the Osirion. Just a little bit of basic information. This is the Temple of Seti I. It's beautiful in here. This temple is amazing. This is a courtyard, and then there's an inner courtyard or hypostyle hall, and then you come in, and this is enclosed, and then there's all these little chapels or areas inside. But the Osirion is off in the back here. And
now what we're looking at around that, are those all houses?
Yes, this is just modern.
And then like fields?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the
This is
the river
agriculture.
basin,
Right.
and so that's all where the farming is happening.
Huh.
Yes, and you'll notice the interesting angle here. You know, we've gone back and forth on what is this, because this picture is north facing. So what is the alignment to here? But the difference again in the construction styles of these two areas could not be more different, and we'll kind of look at that as we go. Also, this is the place where the famous the glyphs are that look like a UFO and they're in here. So let's go. So now we're looking down at the Osirion.
The ones that look like a UFO or the ones that look like modern helicopters?
There's a helicopter and like a UFO looking thing or something.
Okay.
It's a
little hovercraft.
A little hovercraft or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a tank and a hovercraft and a helicopter, something like that. So you'll notice how deep into the ground the Osirion is here. Right? It's in this hole. It's actually 40 or 50 feet below ground level. So it's like a basement of some kind. But there's, was there anything on top of it? I don't know. But it's not below the temple. It's away from it. But the standard story is that this Osirion was built contemporary with the Seti I temple. But the construction styles are completely different from each other, and it looks like this thing is much older. And with the construction style also matches the stuff we see in the Valley Temple and the casing stones of the Mankare pyramid. Huge granite blocks. So we're kind of walking in.
So you've made this point about the difference between walking through one of the temples, versus this place.
That's right. Yeah, well, and there will be I've got some contrast pictures coming up here.
Okay.
So you'll notice that the construction style here is just, we want a pillar and it just needs to be one giant block, right? Normal pillar, when you're going through Egypt and you're walking through their above ground temples, the ones that are familiar to people, the huge round pillars and everything, they're built of, most of them are made with column drums. So like flat discs that have been stacked up to make the very tall pillars. They stack the discs all the way up to make it as tall as they want it, and then they carve the whole thing in place.
Okay.
But these is just a single block, Now this is this one's 2 blocks. This one's got 2 on it as well, but a lot of these are just one giant block, and then there's just an enormous block going across the top. In other words, what I'm saying is the construction style is just absolutely megalithic. These are enormous stones, and it's difficult in pictures to sort of convey. When you walk into this area, into the Osirion, and these blocks are standing in front of you, there's just this sense of enormity and weight and age that's difficult to convey with a photograph. So pay attention to this. We'll see a lot of these. This is more modern, maybe still old, maybe ancient, but modern in terms of comparison to ancient Egypt. This would be people with steel tools trying to quarry granite.
Ah, okay.
So they make these divots, and then you put wooden wedges in, or just pound the steel wedges in until what you're trying to do is crack off this corner. Now, clearly they didn't succeed here, right? They broke it. They broke it, but they didn't get the corner that they wanted. And it's been suggested that maybe because this place is basically buried in sand, and they didn't know how far down the block went. Because really, if you want to do this properly, you want to make these divots all the way down this side to get this corner to break off properly.
Huh.
There's another picture of the block, and you can kind of see like it's heavily eroded. You'll notice waterline marks at the bottom of these, because this thing is so far down into the ground that it's actually at the waterline. The water table.
Okay.
So the lower areas of it are full of water. So you can see these marks. These are all water marks as the water level goes up and down. There's also some like Greek graffiti here. I'm pretty sure this is Greek stuff. And yes, people were stealing the corners of the blocks. You can see here. But yeah, see this is
Damn.
This nasty water here is this is at the water level, water table. But yeah,
they built below that, which implies that the water wasn't running in at the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems like, because there is at least one more level below this with rooms and stuff down below.
So could that just be the shifting of the Nile? Like the Nile was further out at one point when they built this?
Could be, but I mean, this is...
What's crazy is that the Nile used to flood, which would have put this whole thing probably underwater.
Yeah.
Once a year for months.
Yeah.
So that's another crazy aspect, is that, like, why would you build something this massive if it was just going to flood every year for like many months?
Yeah. And again, the question is what the hell is it for? You know, when you're looking at this, it's awkward walking around in here because you're basically sort of skirting past these enormous column blocks with very little room, and next to you is a deep channel full of water. You know, so even if there was no water in it, you're like, what is this for?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Could the water have been intentional?
Maybe. Yeah, some people...
But there's like a stairway going down into the water
Right.
in one of the channels, and
Yeah.
you're just like, wait a minute. There's like a,
Well-
I really wanted to go down there, but
Yeah.
But what if they did that in case they needed to make repairs further down?
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I mean, there's a stairway to get down when the water's lower. I mean, it's like artesian wells were constructed in that way, right? There'd just be stairway going down into the water. And as the water got lower, you can go down there and get on another platform, and there'd be another stairway somewhere.
I mean, it doesn't explain what it's for, but...
Right.
Oh, well, actually, we know what it's for. It's either a tomb or a temple.
This is where the Stargate was.
Right. Oh, there we go.
Sure. But it looks, I don't know, it kind of looks like a basement foundation for a much taller building above it. I don't know. You know, I have no idea, but it
So that's a good
sort
point.
of reminds me
because-
of a...
Yeah, because when you look at the surrounding walls of the sediment, it's just loose gravels and stuff. And so if perhaps, they were building something really tall,
Yeah.
they would have wanted to dig down until they hit some really hard stone.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you make a kind of a basement. I don't know. I mean, could this, this is the basement for the Tower of Babel, buddy.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
It's not very big. I mean, it's megalithic, but it's not large in extent.
Not a large footprint.
Yeah, not a huge footprint. But
Or
this,
maybe it was something they started to build and never finished.
yes, again, it's unfinished, and I'll show you evidence of that here in a minute. This is a good picture because it sort of gives you the idea of the scale of these blocks, and then these ones going across the top.
Yeah.
So you've got a single block making up a pillar, and then there are single blocks that span the distance between each pillar. And then there's on top of those going 90 degrees to that across them are humongous ceiling stones. Most of those are gone now, but there's a section where there's a few of them left. And this is another thing. Those pillars were socketed into the floor here. So this is a missing pillar that was sitting in a socket. So
Where the hell did the pillar go?
it was stolen, probably quarried completely out.
Wow, that would take some effort too.
Yeah, but you can see. You see, if you look closely here, it's kind of tough to see, but there's basically a footprint, an indent around this socket in the floor. And if you look at some of these others, you'll see that the pillars these blocks are sitting in those square indents.
Yeah.
So in other words, what you imagine is the bottom of this pillar, the part we can't see, has a smaller plug that sticks down into that hole and just sockets it into the bedrock. So again, the other thing you see when you're looking at this is you're like, what? Why were they building it so strong? What is the point?
Yeah.
Like, that block is so huge you could just set it on the ground and it's not going to move. But they took the time to cut a hole in the tile that it's sitting on, and then around that hole cut a little bit of a divot, and then the pillar itself has a big plug that plugs down into the hole, and then it sits in that square socket in the, so it's like, it's not moving. It's not,
certainly earthquake proof.
yeah, it's unbelievably beautiful. So here are some remaining ceiling stones. Okay. Now, again, I have to say that this picture just can't possibly convey to you the enormous size of these blocks. When I walked into this alcove or hallway and looked up, those things are like floating above your head, 20 or 30 feet up there or whatever. And they just, I don't know, they feel massive. They're just absolutely gigantic. These things that span across the top of the ceiling. This weird pattern on it is the reflection of the light on the water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm standing underneath those ceiling blocks, and again, look at how strange this area is, right? What is this for? Here are all the blocks holding up the ceiling, or holding up the spans that held up the ceiling blocks. You can see the remnants of some of the ceiling blocks here, and then this is the outside wall of the structure, and there's all these little alcove doorways cut into it. And when you go in these things, they're just, it's like a closet. It's a little bitty room, You can cram 4 people in there if you don't mind tight spaces, basically. They're tiny.
And again, video game brain says only one of those is going to be important.
That's right. Well, you have to go in all of them to see if there's treasure chests, right?
Right,
You got to check every one. And we did. Kyle and I went into every single room and paid attention to details. Didn't find any treasure chests, but...
Were the rooms all identical?
They're pretty close to being identical, yeah. They're rough. So this is a contrast image. So again, we'll look at, this is what you see when you're walking through what I would think of as a normal standard Egyptian temple. This is what they look like on the inside. Covered in writing, every surface, right? These pillars are round, they're beautiful, they're made of thin discs, right? So here's the bottom of the disc and here's the top of it. And it's just a bunch of discs, and they would stack them on top of each other and then carve the whole thing out and then cover them in plaster and then cut these images out of the plaster. Sometimes they cut the images into the stone itself, but a lot of times it's plaster. But highly decorated.
Yeah.
The ceiling, the sides of the blocks holding up the ceiling, the bottoms of the blocks holding up the ceiling, the columns themselves, all the way down to the only part of these temples that isn't covered in text, script, images, and artwork are the floors. And then you look at this.
Yeah, and there's just nothing.
There's nothing. There's some graffiti, in some places, and some really rough cut stuff, probably from the people who built the Seti temple. I think they either knew about this structure or they found it when they were building that temple.
And it's the same thing with the pyramids too. I mean, there's no writing contemporary.
Yeah.
So again, look at that, and how there's just it's got a completely different feel to it as well.
And the thing is, Egyptologists aren't stupid. How can they look at this stuff and think, oh yeah, they all built this at the same time?
Right.
With these vast differences in construction and size of blocks, and the fact that there's no, as you said, one is heavily decorated and the other stuff has no writing on it.
Right.
I think it just comes down to that inability early on for them to consider that this could be many stages, many ages built upon other ages. They were just looking at it as one contemporary time period.
Right. Now, I also understand that it's completely possible for one group of people or builders or whatever to build in different styles. Like if you imagine like a parking garage versus a church or a cathedral or something.
Yeah, or even, an apartment building versus a house.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's just the scope and scale and style of this and the stone. This is all granite.
Yeah.
Versus this stuff, which is limestone. Much softer, easier to work with, and not as megalithic. I mean, it's still huge. Like this block here, starting here and going across to the top of this column, these are massive. Some of these, when you're going around in Egypt, some of these are sitting on the ground because they've tumbled down or they've fallen or whatever. And when you walk up next to this thing, you realize how big these are.
Yeah.
They're huge. Because
they're almost as tall as a person.
Yeah. Because they're 40 feet up, and so they look small from here, but they're big blocks. But again, they're limestone and often plastered. And the carving, all this detail is cut out of plaster.
Yeah, and it's also very impressive, but not quite as impressive as the giant granite blocks.
Right. And just now, so totally different. It implies a completely different mindset.
There are some pillars like these, some columns like these that are solid one single piece granite.
We saw
they have
at Tanis.
They don't have any writing on them like this, but the top, see the palm fronds coming up off the top of the column there on the right. They have those carved into them.
Yeah.
And they look just like this. So it's, we wonder, were those found? Were they artifacts at the time of the building of some of these temples? These ancient giant single piece granite columns.
Yeah.
And just moved into place and then added designs to it.
Well, it's like this
one's made of limestone or sandstone.
Yeah, these are copies of what they have found of these original ancient artifacts that are single piece columns of granite.
Oh, I see.
One piece. I mean, it's like the other thing is you have to realize like how much wider the top of that column is than the actual column itself. And so if you were going to carve it out of a single piece, that it would have had to have been enormous at the top, and then they cut it all the way down to give it that sort of fanning out shape. It's just, I don't know. It's just a side note, but there are indicators as you go through Egypt and you see these different building styles that the builders either learned from one another. They did have similar styles. I don't know if you mentioned the way the column drums were pillowy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. So they had stacked those discs up, and we saw a couple
sandstone.
Yeah, sandstone discs to make the columns, and we saw a couple of places where, again, the job had been incomplete, and there were a couple of pillars at the very end of the row of pillars where they hadn't completed the smoothing out and carving, and they look like, I don't know, like biscuits. They're rough.
Yeah, big old giant biscuits just stacked up. I mean, they were many, many more feet in diameter than the actual finished columns were. So they were taking off a lot of material. But it's sandstone. I mean, you could literally scratch some of it off of there with your fingernail. It's not incredibly hard stuff.
Really? Okay.
Okay. So now we're looking again at the outer wall, and I'm just going to point out real quick, you notice that it looks like hints of nubs here. There's one there.
The exterior wall. This is the interior, though, of the building.
Yeah. It's the outside wall, but the inside the building because it's down in the ground. But yeah, so it looks like a nub. Used to be one. There's one there. Here's like, I don't know, a reverse nub divot, some kind. Just interesting things you see. Here you see the ceiling, some of the ceiling stones going around the corner downward, right? So that like they stacked these up and then they actually smoothed it out upwards. They cut into the block going upward.
Yeah.
So it leaves this block going down around the corner. And then we were noticing these. Now, plenty of people, you see videos where people are pointing out these huge megalithic walls have these tiny little inserts.
Yeah.
So we found this one, and this is actually on an outside corner. So this was interesting to us because, again, we're thinking about construction and what you're doing, and that possibly the goal here was you want to smooth this wall out, but maybe this block broke. This corner broke off.
Right.
So what you do is you kind of cut out a space, and then you put a little insert in here so that when you smooth the whole thing out, you end up with a clean face going all the way around the corner. In other words, this little tiny insert doesn't go all the way through the wall.
Right. Right.
So like, here's one. Right. So maybe the upper corner side of this block was damaged right here somewhere. So they completely cut it out, and then they put this insert in there. And then when they did the cleaning of the entire thing, it fits perfectly. It's nice and smooth, but it doesn't have to go all the way through the wall. That's the point of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And just an interesting construction.
Well, to me,
concept.
When I looked at those, some of the pictures of the walls and things in like Peru, and you'd see those tiny little stones, I was imagining them as being like these long, flat stones that went all the way through the depth of the wall. And seeing these things in Egypt and in so many different states where you could see, okay, this wall is clearly unfinished, and they've stuck this rough piece in there, and you can tell that it doesn't go through the wall. it kind of cleared things up for me.
Yeah.
Specifically, like this is part of the finishing process, is making these little stones.
That makes
Fill a
sense.
void.
So here,
See a couple more right there.
yeah, here's a couple of inserts right here. So these probably don't go all the way through the wall. They're just to fill damage,
Fix a corner.
to fix a corner or whatever.
How are they being held in? Can you tell?
I don't think there's any mortar in these joints. This is all dry laid stone, I think. I don't know for sure.
Well, I mean the inserts. How are the inserts being
Yeah,
held?
I think
Yeah, look, how is this being held in there? I think it's pressure from this block onto that one.
they're cut deep enough
Yeah.
to where they can like fit it in there tightly, and it's just being held by the stone. Maybe they used a little bit of mortar for these little
It's
pieces.
possible.
I
yeah.
don't know.
It's possible.
But again, this stuff is so old and the joints are so fine that it doesn't. Maybe they did have some slurry they slapped on there just to add
some kind of
rigidity,
thin glue. Yeah.
I don't know.
So again, we were looking at the outside of the wall, and again, because of the angle of the sun and the shadows, you can sort of see how there's all these vertical marks,
Vertical scooping.
Yeah.
scoops. And this block, look at these two. There's a nub, and there's one across the top of the doorway. And the doors are cut up through the block, so it looks like, again, when you're standing in here, it looks like the block is going down around the corner, right? Every one of these doors is cut into the, and that's you just, when you think about this, you're just like, this is extra work. Why didn't you just make this block be the top? Instead, you had to do all this extra work to cut out the top of the doorway into the block above it. This one, the one that's spanning the lintel, basically.
Granite. I mean,
Unless it wasn't a lot of work.
Right.
that's
Even if it wasn't a lot of work, it's more work.
True. True.
And when you try to think about the amount of dust. I had a job once where I had to there was tiling done on the inside of a shower. And the grout on the tiling, whoever did the grout job, like splattered grout all over the place, and there was drips down on the surfaces of the tile. So I had to go in there and I had to scrape away all this grout, this excess grout. And it created so much dust in that thing. I mean, I was masked up, goggles and everything, and it was just such a huge pain in the ass and so much dust. And to think about doing a job like this and grinding away like feet of granite.
Yeah.
It's like a mountain of material waste that you would have to then get rid of. It's mind-boggling, some of these jobs that
I think I just figured it out. It's aliens.
they don't breathe.
They don't breathe.
Right.
They breathe dust.
And they use lasers.
So again, you'll notice the quality of the outward facing part of this wall is it's pillowy and sort of rough, right? Like we saw at the Mankare pyramid.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one of what I'm wanting you to notice here. And along with all these vertical marks that you can kind of see all these scoops taken out, and they seem to be roughly the same width. It's not always, but again, this wall is not flat. It's sort of rough. Now, look at this. Basically, I took this picture, and now I'm just going to turn to the right to look at the wall that's the same wall that's next to me. Look at this. They were flattening that wall. And you can see where the tool stopped, right? So now think of a guy in your house with a paint roller. He's going to start at the top and work his way down. And he's just going to roll it, for however long his arm reaches.
Along the scaffold.
Yeah. And then he's going to come back and do the lower part next. And whoever was doing this, and they were flattening this wall out very smooth. And you can see that the tool seems to have a common quality here, that it was in other words, this doesn't look like chisel work, right?
No, not at all.
And again,
it looks like sanding.
Yeah. And here's this radius, right? Again, there's a clear line where the tool stopped, and then all along the bottom. And look, farther to the right, you see it. It goes all the way along.
And he clearly didn't care how far down he went. Just like if you were rolling a paint on a wall, you're not really too concerned with how far down you go when you're at the top, because you're going to just go down and
continue going downward.
Continue going downward with those, so that you can see that they're just up and down and up. They deviate by many inches.
And I'll point out, you see these little notches that go up from the edges of the tool mark, which is not, this is not something you would see with chiseling, right? It looks like the edge of the tool went down here and he stops, and then the edge of the tool goes down here and he stops, and he doesn't quite get all the material right here, right?
He doesn't need to. He can do it in the next run.
Yes, he's going to get it in the next run. You see them here.
Could have been a she.
Could
have been a she. Yeah, you're totally right.
Here's one going up. Here's another one. You can see them, those little notches pointing upwards all along the bottom of this very uneven line. And it just, again, it looks so. Once again, there are multiple things being pointed out here. They were intending to flatten the wall. They were almost done with the job. And for whatever reason, this guy got from, he had a scaffold, and he got from here all the way over to here, and he never finished. It's like they put the tools down or took their tools home, and they never came back. And it's still like this thousands and thousands of years later.
And why? Why so many places that they would have done this?
Right.
Yeah, and it's on this particular job, they just got started, right? It's like the Mankare pyramid. They just flattened the faces, maybe perhaps on each side, like just kind of getting ready. Like, here's the angle.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's wild.
But what's interesting is that they were almost done with the job, right?
Yeah,
this is the finishing work, and it's the finishing work that doesn't get completed. But you can see that they did it to the ceiling. The ceiling is flat and smooth, beautiful, right? And they had done it to part of this wall. And let's see if I can zoom in and point this out. You can see how this block right here goes around the corner.
Yeah.
Because its face used to stick out 2 more inches.
Yeah, its face used to be kind of puffy, and it stuck out this far. And they set this block up against that, and then when they did the smoothing out, it makes the block go around the corner.
So did they cut? So they must cut the blocks first, but then just leave certain faces puffy because that way they can line them all up later. They don't have to do that pre-aligning.
Right. So look at this. These are unsmooth, right? So probably once you would come along and smooth out this part of the wall and this part of the wall, one of these blocks would end up going around the corner.
Yeah.
I can't tell which one it might be, but a lot of times they'll alternate. This one goes around the corner, and then this one goes around the corner that way, and then this one.
But even so, when you're looking at those blocks down below, they're sort of coming. They're coming to a point. They're not. It's not like there's a gap there. They're somehow getting them in there super tight.
Yeah.
And then they're shaving off the front of them.
Right.
Yeah. So if you go back to that top corner block, you can see that where the mating faces are, they finished those.
Yeah.
But then at some point where the mating faces were no longer touching, they just leave it pillowy. Right? So the one on the right would be sticking out towards the left. The one on the left would be sticking out towards the right. And just depending on where your imaginary corner is that based on, it had to have been a plan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you go back to do the flattening, that corner is what creates the going around corners thing. It's hard to, I don't know.
It's hard to describe it.
I've been threatening to do this, make a series of photographs, like actually building something out of, say, styrofoam blocks and then cutting it out so that you can see the process of.
Has anyone else ever mentioned this? Because I
don't think so. This is the thing I don't know. I had that idea in Egypt when we were looking at this stuff based on the fact that we saw so many unfinished and partially finished things. It was like, okay, that is why they because I had always imagined like what. The guy comes from the quarry and he cuts this block and he puts this tiny little 2-inch 90-degree turn to the right at the edge, and then they fit that into the corner. Like, that's insane. But when you saw the blocks pillowy,
when you can
on
see
an inside corner, and then you see a piece of it flat, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
that's why they didn't cut them with tiny little 2-inch 90-degree angles. They did it later. It was the finishing process that made that. Now, the vertical stacking, they did do something like that because they had to finish, like this little tiny one you see in the picture on the right there. They had to finish that surface before they set that block down.
Right.
So they were perfectly capable of doing it the other way. It's just
But in a sense, okay, so if you have a tool that can just shave this stuff off,
yeah,
it
and
makes
that's
more
what
sense.
it looks like. Yeah,
yeah, it makes more sense to do it that way because that way you don't have to measure the block exactly for the front part either.
Yep. And I didn't point this out. I usually point this out at the beginning, but this protects the what you know is going to be the finished face from damage.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So all the while you're building, you can drop a block and it can scrape down the wall. You can rig up your scaffolding. I even thought of like the nubs and stuff. Like if they're these big nubs were sticking out, they may have been like, okay, that nub's in the way now because we need to put a scaffold here and just
just shave it off. Yeah.
But I'm firmly in the nubs for lifting camp nowadays. Like after looking at all these different stages of construction and seeing nubs on rocks and seeing like the gouge marks on the undersides of these nubs, I was just like, okay, these are, in my opinion, clearly for rigging and lifting and setting blocks. And then once they set them, they can shave off that nub roughly as they have done here. Because it's not the finished work, but they do get it out of the way.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's cool. But, you know, I'm open to being wrong about that. One of the things that really sold me on the idea of the nubs for lifting was the lids to the Serapeum boxes.
Yeah, and we'll see some of that.
Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
All right.
Check out wheredidtheroadgo.com. You will find an archive of every show, right back to the very first one that aired January 26, 2013. There's links to all of our social media, Discord, Facebook, the Facebook group, Twitter, YouTube. You can pick up merch at our store that is linked on the page. You can become a Patreon and get extra content every month for as little as $3 a month. You can leave a donation, go through blog entries, and you can contact us. If you have stories you'd like to share for a future listener stories episode, stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com is the place to send them. For general contact, it's contact@wheredidtheroadgo.com. And if you want to mail me something, you can do so at P.O. Box 444, Ovid, New York, 14521. I'd like to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons, because without you, this show would not be what it is. And I want to give a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Chuck Shutters, Leanne Cherry, CJ, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Christine, a blue second gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Lemona, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy and communicable, Christopher Ernst, Craig Cicernos, Belluminati, Craig Parmenter, Diane B., MTK, Eric Todd, J., James Lattimore, James Lindsay, Jim Pyre, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, MJ Armstrong, Jim and Sophie, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Oli Andre Olar, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Philosopher of Mirrors, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Stacy Sherwood, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Verosh K., Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Stephen D., Amber Hall, and Craig Sagastumi. I thank all of you for the incredible support. So we are back here on Where Did the Road Go with the Brothers of the Serpent, of the Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
That's right.
Snake 1 and Snake 2.
Snake 1, Snake 2.
Still here.
Cuss and Ryle.
Right. Yes, that's it.
Continuing with the unfinished presentation, I'm going to play this video real quick. This is just me scanning the wall that we've been talking about here in the Osirion. The point here was just to try to give an impression of the scale and show you where the unfinished finishing work is.
Oh, yeah.
So that you can kind of see it with the rest of the wall. And there's
it's really obvious once you've pointed it out.
Yeah, what is it? 3, 4, 5, 6 alcoves on the side there.
So here's a question. Did they just carve the alcoves out after the fact? Did they just put giant blocks in place and then just carve the alcoves out?
I don't know. That's a great question. And, you know, we when we were going through here, we were looking, do you remember where there's
there are cylindrical
hinge
holes.
sockets.
So drill holes up in there where you can
hinge a door.
Have double doors
Yeah.
on each one of these that only open outward.
Yeah.
Huh.
And they could have been stone. I don't know, but I don't think they're in the floor.
They're not in the floor, but you could kind of see one here. So there's like you could hinge a door into these, or 2 doors. And again, these little chambers aren't very big. So you just wonder what.
Kind of duck into them a little bit.
Yeah. It's just a strange.
And then the room inside there is just, it's like, I don't know, 6 foot square.
Yeah.
It was just a broom closet.
Yes.
Yes. Mini brooms.
That's where the crystal generators were.
There you go.
All right. So we're leaving the Osirion and continuing up the Nile, down south towards Upper Egypt to the Aswan Quarry. This is the source of all this granite we've been looking at. And this is another, like I said, another 200 miles. So now we're 500 miles from the plateau. This is another Google Earth image closer into the quarry. And you can see this thing. This is the Unfinished Obelisk.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And this is, you could say, this is a big outcrop of granite. And you can kind of see the patterns that people have been quarrying in this thing for a long time. This isn't the only granite quarry, but this is one of the major ones. So here's a ground view of it coming up from the, this is the bottom part. And they told us that like water used to come up from the Nile and fill this area so that people could take all the blocks they've been quarrying and get them on rafts or boats or whatever and get them out into the river.
Right.
What's great is when you come to this quarry to go look at the obelisk, before they let you actually walk out into the quarry, they make you watch a propaganda video.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we call it propaganda, but the point is like they want you to sit down and watch this video on how they use the little round pounding stones to make the obelisk. That they had these little cantaloupe-sized pounding stones made of like a kind of green stone called dolorite, and that they would sit there and just pound on the granite until they cut out the.
I mean, these things are. These things are incredibly heavy.
Yeah, they're heavy.
Has anyone ever emulated it? Has anyone ever tried to make it very large?
They tried doing this, and they some guy pounded away at it and then claimed that he got and then he collected all the dust from pounding for an hour and measured, it in cubic centimeters and then averaged it like, okay, yeah, this is totally doable for like, so many guys working so many shifts to do this in so many years.
Yeah.
So it's totally, that's what happened.
But to that level of precision?
No. They don't even talk about the precision. There's a lot of things they don't talk about when it comes to that idea.
And we're gonna look at the tool mark. So what we're seeing here, again, you might recognize this style. This is the steel chisels. Right, making a bunch of notches, and then you put wedges in there. Sometimes they say, you chisel these out, and then you put wooden wedges in there, and you pour water on them to make them swell, and they'll crack the granite off. And you can see somebody got themselves a nice big block, or maybe multiple blocks along this here. But again, this is a different technique than what we're going to be looking at in other places of the quarry. You can see more of the notches here. Here's some of them. They would chisel these out. And again, this is in granite, so it's hard. So you don't want to do too much of this chiseling work.
Right.
Even with a steel chisel, this is a lot of work. Here's chisel marks, looks like. But then you see stuff like this. A completely different character.
Yeah.
These are like scoops. And they're all, again, roughly of the same size. And it ends up with this sort of a grid pattern. Here's another section of it. So the idea that somebody was using round pounding stones and ending up with these square scoop marks, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's zero reason for that pattern to be there if you were doing that with a pounder.
Yeah. Making the pattern would be hard.
Well, it would be counterproductive because the best place to take away material would be the ridges.
Yeah.
And so for somebody to like be pounding away and make a bowl shape and then not pound the ridges down because that would also take away a lot more material, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like if you were pounding this area flat, you wouldn't end up with a grid of ridges that are an inch high.
Yeah. Here's another section where it looks like somebody was scooping out, and this is a much larger tool. This is actually going downhill. So I've got a picture where I walked down here and turned around and took a picture looking uphill so you can see. There's Kyle taking a picture looking
down. The previous picture.
If that was the previous picture, I'd be in it. So yeah,
this if you were at the right angle.
I cut that part out.
So you can see this scooping pattern, and there's also, you'll notice that there's a continuous line going down right here, like whatever it was. They took scoops out here, and then they took another set of scoops out below, right? Because you can see this line kind of going down right here.
It looks like sand.
It does look like sand, but this is actually granite. But yes, it looks like somebody was, if you were scooping out with a shovel kind of thing in sand, you might get this kind of pattern.
Right.
Here's another area where there's an interesting series of scoops, and you can kind of see them all along the sides of this stuff. Here's one at the bottom. There's like a natural discontinuity in the material here, but somebody was scooping all along the base of it. And it's tough. So this is a quarry, so they're not building anything. They're just they're wanting to get blocks of stone out, right? But you can see scoops, and in some places we'll be able to see these scoop lines go all the way down the wall and then around the corner here. Like this. You can see that these scoop lines that we can clearly see at the bottom, they actually continue all the way up the wall. They're continuous lines. All of them go all the way up.
And that's not from weathering.
No.
Okay.
I mean, weathering has probably made them less visible.
Right.
Yeah, I imagine those ridges would have been nice, sharp corners when they first did this.
But it's interesting. It looks like they were scooping all the way down, and when they reached this area where the material seems to change, they kind of were. That was, that's the bottom of the area they were getting. I don't know. It's just.
And what were they using it for?
Well, there's granite building material all over Egypt. So
so what I would say about this particular area is that the empty space on the right is where the work was, the material that they wanted.
Yeah.
So they were cutting a trench down, and you'll see this later, and going underneath the working piece.
Yep.
And then they broke that piece off and took it away.
Yeah.
And so now all we're left with is the outside
trench wall.
The trench wall from the piece that they took away.
The piece they wanted was here somewhere. Yeah, exactly. That was a good way to put it. So here's a kind of a looking down, you can see all these scoop patterns, different step downs where they were removing material. This is another great one. This one, you kind of like, if you look at this, you sort of get the idea of an angle change as you go along, right? Like, in other words, the scoops here are sort of straight from one end to the other, but as you go farther down, they kind of get this angle.
Yeah.
See how it kind of starts to turn. And this, we saw this all over the quarry. This is one of the clearer ones you can see with the sunlight and the way the shadows hit it properly, but we saw this all over quarry, which kind of begins to, in our minds, imply a turning radius, like that think of a backhoe. So somewhere way back here, somewhere is the center of the tool, and it's got a big articulated arm coming out, and it's reaching out and taking a bite out of the granite, taking another bite out of the granite, turns a bit, taking another bite, and as it continues to turn, you end up with this this turning angle, or it could be something else, but it sort of gives you the idea of a center. And then there's this stuff. These are called test pits. And you see them scattered around where somebody has dug down sometimes 30 feet or more.
And there's rubble in the bottom, so we don't really know how far they go down.
Right. They're all full of sand and rubble, but they're going deep. And the idea here was that they were checking the quality of the granite as it went farther down. You want to dig down and see, like in that other area where we saw the material change, right? So you want to know where that fracture is. You want to know, is there any big cracks, or are there any massive inclusions that would make the material weaker, right? So
to me, this would indicate, like, let's say you wanted to take it, you knew what size piece you wanted to take, so you go to the four corners of an area and you make these holes, to see if, like, okay, can we cut down so far, and are there any cracks that are continuous from one hole to the other? That's what I mean. Because this doesn't make any sense unless you're already planning to take, like, part of the wall of this hole out as a piece, as a working piece.
And again, you'll notice that there's this quality of the work. That it doesn't look chiseled. Something else is happening here.
Yeah, that is strange. That rib going down the middle of it, it's just so weird.
There's another test pit, not as deep, or maybe just completely full of rubble at the end of a trough here.
Yeah.
Or maybe that was the bottom of a much deeper test pit.
It could have been, the
like,
bottom.
Okay, this is how far, then we're good, and we can cut that piece out.
So we're going to take a look at this thing, a closer look at this thing. Now, this thing is just monstrous. It's completely impossible to convey how absolutely enormous this thing is. This is the Unfinished Obelisk. You can kind of see, this is Yusuf, our tour guide, standing at the other end of it. So that sort of gives you an idea of scale. So Yusuf is a big dude. This thing. But look at the grid pattern on it and around it. You see the scooping all the way around it. And they're, so the idea here is, okay, you want an obelisk, so you're digging it out of the granite, and they're making these deep trenches, and these are deep. But they're gonna keep digging these trenches to get to the bottom corner, and then they're gonna start digging underneath it. Now, they didn't make it that far with this.
But they dig underneath it on all sides, and then they break it off.
And then you crack it off there. And then somehow you've got to lift it out of there, get it over these ridges of material, and down around the lower part and into the Nile somehow to float it to wherever you want it to go.
If something like that would even float on the Nile.
Right. What are you going to float it with? Yeah.
That's the thing. There was a documentary years ago talking about the Olmec heads. And they were saying, well, we know they were quarried here, and we think they just, put them on rafts and they just floated them downstream. And so they decided they were going to test this theory. And so you have like 100-pound head or whatever it is. And they're like, so we're going to take, or not 100-ton head. And they're like, we're going to take a 1-ton block or a half-ton block, and we're going to do what we think they did. And they emulated it, and I'm like, but that's not the size of the blocks.
Right.
Yes, but this giant rock is basically just a bunch of very small rocks, which float in water.
It's like, okay, if you're putting something heavy on a boat, there's displacement, but there's a point where that displacement is bigger than the Nile.
Yeah, it just completely fails. So I've just got a bunch of different angles looking at this thing. So you can see that they were being careful with the faces here, but now based on all the other stuff we've seen, I think we could probably assume that the finished obelisk was going to be smaller than this. In other words, they're leaving a puffy, sort of rough,
maybe a foot on each side.
Yeah, a foot of material on each side, so that when they get it to the site, then they're gonna cut it down, right? They're gonna remove this outer stuff.
Yeah,
there's a bevel on that corner. It's
but right, like, so they've got this bevel, and that's good because sharp corners are going to be the weakest point, the easiest part to break. So you don't want that to, if something happens, it could make a huge break in it. So you make a bevel, But again, look at these, look at the scooping, look at the grid pattern on the surface. Like somebody was working on this thing with a tool. And in some cases, like right here, either they were scooping out some material that wasn't very good, or getting rid of a flaw. I don't know.
Yeah.
So they cut deeper right there.
Well, also, if you're just going to puff it down, if you're just going to sand it down later, basically, it doesn't really matter. You could, something might have been annoying right there. They just cut it out. We're going to make it,
Yeah. You just get rid of the not quite good material because you don't want it to cause the rest of the block to have a problem.
Right.
So this is the top. So this is part of the way you can tell it's going to be an obelisk. They weren't planning on cutting this up into smaller blocks because they're already making the top of it pointy like an obelisk, right? It's got this sort of pointy top here.
Now the standard story here is that they didn't ever remove it because it had this fracture.
Yeah.
You see this big crack in the top
crack in it,
which makes no sense to me because they would never have excavated this much of it to begin with if it had a fracture in it like that. So either the fracture came later or during the excavation, like if an earthquake happened or something like that caused it to fracture and then they left it. But I'm not really sure about that either. There's no indication that this thing would have been left completely unexcavated, because you can imagine if it did fracture while they were doing the construction, well, then they could have cut the lower portion out to use for something else.
Yeah, they did all this work.
So the fact that the whole thing is left and it was buried in how many 50 feet
lots of
rubble
stuff stacked
on it. There was other cut blocks, like some very large stones, many multi-ton blocks that were buried in other rubble on top of this thing. So when the archaeologists originally excavated it,
they had to do a lot of heavy lifting to get all this stuff out of there,
to remove everything. So the idea is that it's possible that it was hidden from more modern, I say modern, but I mean from the Egyptians.
Yeah.
Right? It was hidden from the dynastic Egyptians.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like Kyle said, it seems very unlikely that you would do all this work and then, it's cracked and you're like, oh, well, just leave it.
Leave the entire thing after all that work.
Right. We're not gonna go down here below this crack and cut out any of this good material. Just gonna leave the whole thing, and all that work has gone to waste.
Well, here's a question. Once you sand down some of that, is it much bigger than the other ones?
That's the thing. That's the key.
It's tough to tell. But it still would have been
They say that this is the biggest one, and so my thought was exactly that, based on looking at how much material they removed from some of the granite stones that they did already place when they went to do the flattening. So I'm thinking well, how much bigger would this have been if they'd have flattened a foot of material off of every side of it?
Yeah, and based on some of the obelisks, the still standing obelisks we saw at Luxor.
There's some enormous.
Yeah, if you took this thing and removed 10 to 12 inches of material from all sides, it would probably be around the size of those things they're so huge. It's unbelievable standing below a standing obelisk and looking up at it. They are massive. But you can see here, they've dug these trenches. You can see the scooping pattern at the bottom of the trench. And it's hard to see in this picture, but this pattern it's continuous. So it starts, let me go to a different picture here. It'll start here, and it'll go down the wall, and it'll go across the bottom of the trench, and it'll go up the side of the obelisk, and basically across the top of it, fitting this grid pattern, roughly, and then down the other side, and around the bottom, and up the side. There was just a continuous, they're continuous tool marks. You can kind of see them at the bottom of this. And if we go back here, you can see one of their test pits.
Oh.
They cut this very deep into the rock to check the quality of the granite. So again, you start wondering about this fracture. They did cut test pits into this on both sides and at the corners to look for problems. But yeah, look at this. This is just, it's just amazing how this, look at that. So over here, they were making much rougher cuts. This is not a part you're worried about. You're just removing material to give you working space or something.
Yeah.
And then it goes around, and you can kind of see the lines on the wall here, vertical lines. And at the bottom, you can see how the pattern goes across the bottom and up the side of the obelisk. There's the front of it again. We didn't get to walk in the trenches of this one. It would have been great. But they don't really want you down in there. They wouldn't let us walk on it either. There's a test pit on the other side.
You might break it.
Yeah, it's very fragile. But we did get to walk in the trenches on some other ones, which we're going to look at here in a minute. Here's just more pictures of you can see the pattern.
Look at that corner sticking out down there, right? It's like
this down here.
Obviously, they were going to take that material off.
Yeah. It's a rough cut, but still. So yeah, you can tell that they didn't quite make it all the way to the bottom, but they would have dug down further and then started going underneath it.
Right.
And again, let's go back to they were using these cantaloupe-sized cobbles by hand, pounding on the granite. Now you imagine, start crawling underneath this thing, pounding upwards.
What have they ever found any of these cantaloupe-sized things?
Yeah, they're all over the place.
Oh, okay.
But you know what? They're all so similar in size that people have wondered, like, were these they could act as bearings to roll. You had a whole bunch of them.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. They weren't like cutting tools. They were rolling bearings, something to move the blocks around with. And they'd fit in the scoops, I don't know. It's just, but yes, there are a bunch of them they found. And this is the other thing. A lot of the ones that they found were actually split in half or broken, shattered. And the idea that it's a kind of stone called dolerite or whatever. It's very hard. It's a little bit harder than granite, which is why they say that, you can use it to pound away at the granite and you'll actually remove more granite than you do material from the pounding stone. But the idea that somebody broke those by hand is just a little strange.
But they do fit in the grooves there?
Well, I mean, they're like cantaloupe size. They don't fit.
I mean, they would sit in them, but they don't.
Oh, they don't fit.
No, they don't fit them.
So this is a different area. This is a place where we were able to walk around in the trenches next to the work.
The thing that those grooves would do is prevent them from rolling down the slope.
Yeah.
Right? Because that thing is at quite a bit of a steep angle. And so if you did need those as, say, supports, like when you broke it off.
You didn't want it to fall.
You didn't want it to completely land all the way against the ground. You could set a bunch of those dolerite
underneath
balls along this trench all the way down to the bottom, and then when you broke it off, it would like basically sit on them so that you could still get rigging underneath or something,
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't fit the size of those squarish things. Too big. The divots are too big.
Yeah. So again, this is the work. Okay, so we're in a different area, but we're still looking at a huge piece of granite that they were trying to remove that never got finished. And again, keep in mind the whole unfinished, like we saw the Mankare pyramid didn't get finished. The Osirion, it was not finished. And now here we have these enormous things. And again, with all these, you see these scoop marks evident, these tool marks in the stone. So this is the trench wall, and you can see the lines go all the way down across the bottom of the trench. And in this case, it actually goes underneath this big block right here and then back up.
And up, yeah.
So here you can see the lines of the tool marks going all the way down the side of the trench. And this is looking underneath. So they were beginning to cut beneath. Wow. This is the thing that they wanted, right? This is the bottom of the big block they were cutting out. It's not really clear what it was going to be. But the scoop mark goes across the bottom, up around the corner here, and then up the side of the block and all the way out. And it's continuous. Look at this. Now, again, picture the idea of the cantaloupe-sized pounding stones, and how are they even getting this pattern?
The great thing about these marks here is that they are not weathered very much. Like they're not exposed to the open elements, and so these are fairly smooth, and you can see the sharpness of the corners of those ridge marks. And this kind of gives you an idea of the radius of the edge of that tool.
That's right.
You can't, I mean, that angle right there would be incredibly hard to do with one of those big Diorite pounders.
Yeah.
Right.
You would need something smaller to get into that tighter corner.
Yeah, look at that. You can see the tool mark comes down the wall, across the bottom of the trench, up, and then to the bottom of the work block, up the side, and then it goes all the way up, you know.
And I would point this out too. The way it's sort of wavy at the base here, where it starts to change angle, right?
Yeah.
It's coming down the wall. You can kind of see it's fairly going straight, and then it makes this angle change, and there's a definitive divot into the stone. Like I think of running a backhoe or something when you're trying to combine multiple hydraulic valves to make a smooth curve. Like sometimes it's not that smooth, especially if you're working fast. And on this outer edge, this is not the work.
Yeah, they don't care what that face looks like.
This is the quarry. The work's on the left side, and so it's much. You want to be much finer when you're doing that work. But over here, you could see like perhaps the guy comes down, the tool comes down, and then they make an abrupt angle change right there, and you get that little just divot mark, and then it goes down. There's another abrupt angle change, another one, and then they get near the work and they start going nice and fine and easy.
Being careful.
I mean, those are the types of things that I recognize right there from just running machines.
Right.
And that I don't think you would get. I mean, across all the way down, you can see past the guy that's standing there. It's very similar along all the other ones. If there was 100 guys in here with Diorite pounders, would you see that regular, abrupt change in angle from a bunch of guys doing their own work with pounding stones? I don't think so.
Yeah,
no.
And why would they leave these steep, sharp ridges
that are easy to break away?
That's the easiest thing to break away if you're pounding on it by hand. It's just a strange. Okay. Now we're leaving the quarry. We're going back down the Nile, up north to the Serapeum in Saqqara. So there's not much to look at on the surface here. It's just a kind of a hole in the desert. There's some stuff around it, but it's really just if there was surface stuff here, it's gone. At this point, it's just a hole in the desert. But when you go inside, it's full of these huge boxes with these massive lids. And again, these are much more finely finished, but you'll see the scooping and this kind of the same sort of character in other places that we've seen. I'm going to go through a bunch.
Some of these have lids that weigh up to 30 tons. The boxes themselves are 70 tons, so it's 100 tons together. The boxes with the lids are too big to move through the tunnels together with the lid on top, so they had to move them in separately.
That's right.
They
moved them in separately, but finished them in the tunnels.
Yes.
Finished them out, right? So you cut the lid off the bottom and rough scoop out the interior of the box, and then you get it down in the tunnel. And then once you get it in place, or at least you have it down in the tunnel, then you do the finishing work. And that's the idea, at least. And the reason people say that is because there are unfinished boxes sitting in the hallways, not in place.
Right.
But again, you can see like these divots. The light is showing you that they had a general concept of the shape, right? You want this prism shape for the lid, and then basically a long rectangle for the box itself. But somebody was coming along and cutting material out, just like we saw over at the quarry, where they seem to be scooping out maybe flawed material from the lids.
So like with drum cymbals, right? If you get a crack in the cymbal, you would drill. One common thing to kind of preserve the cymbal is to drill at the very end of the crack. As far as the crack runs into the cymbal, you drill a hole right there at the end of the crack, and that will stop the crack from continuing as you resonate the cymbal more by hitting it with a stick, right? If you don't drill that hole, each time you hit it and it resonates, that crack can continue. So this is interesting aspect of these boxes that they scooped out. As you can see here, there's all these weird random divots along the lid of the box. So some people have thought, well, maybe there was a crack in the stone, or maybe there's some kind of impurity or something that may have weakened it, and they would have removed that material. Well, that's very interesting, because there's no reason to really do that if there's not going to be a lot of mechanical energy impacting this material.
Right. Once they're here, you would think like there's no reason to, unless you're thinking that they're going to be vibrating or something.
I mean, it's a pretty good...
when the UFOs come down, they shake the ground. And
that's right. It's a pretty good indicator that the builders were concerned with these cracks continuing to grow.
Right.
Or whatever, it's an idea.
And even if they were on the surface where you have day, night, cold, hot, you don't think they're going to move, but you're going to want to cut you're going to scoop the cracks out because of that. But they're down in a cave. These are down in a cave where the temperature is basically the same all the time.
I can't remember. Was anything found in any of these?
No.
Yeah.
All of them were opened in antiquity except one, and that one was dynamited, or somebody used gunpowder or something and blew a hole in the side of it because, it was too hard to move the lid. And it was empty. I have a picture of that one coming up, but this Kyle's back here. That kind of gives you the scale of these boxes. When you're just looking at these pictures,
standing at the other end.
Kyle's standing at the other end of the box. They're absolutely gigantic. And again, notice all the scoops.
Yeah.
And I'll point out too, so obviously the steel work is modern, but these alcoves that they're in are very rough cut. Limestone. It's cut completely out of the bedrock. So this isn't like somebody put the boxes in place and then built a structure around them. They had to move these boxes through the tunnels that were cut into the bedrock. Okay. So you have very limited working space because the tunnels the boxes basically barely fit in the tunnels. The lids don't fit in the tunnels themselves. The only place the boxes will fit with the lids on them is in the alcoves that are made for the boxes to sit in, and there's one box per alcove. Huh. And the alcove is actually cut down from the floor level of the walkways so that, roughly speaking, the top edge of the box part is close to being level with the floor area that you're at. It's a little bit above it. But you can basically step out onto these because they're set down, right? And then the alcoves themselves are very tall, whereas the hallways that you're walking around in are not. So this implied to me, I was wondering, this gives you room to move the lid up and get whatever's in the box out, and you can slide it right into the hallway or the reverse, right? This gives you room to mess with this stuff, but not much. There's not a lot of room. There's not a lot of machinery room. What were they... Because they were finishing the boxes in place, where did the machinery go? Or the tools? Like what tools were they using?
And I don't know.
That's a big issue with everything in Egypt is where are the tools?
Yeah.
I don't know specifically about this, the Serapeum, about soot in the cave, but I don't think that there was a lot of soot present. There may have been in this particular instance.
Maybe. It was used all the way up until...
It was used, yeah. But there are cases where, like, for example, in the Great Pyramid, inside all these tunnels in the pyramid, there's no soot marks.
Yeah.
In the Grand Gallery. So how are they lighting the place to do the finish work inside? It's not clear.
Look at this beautiful crystal inclusion.
Yeah.
In this lid. And again, look at these massive scoops that were taken out. Once they got the basic prism shape, they took these sometimes huge bites out of them.
Weird divots on the bottom.
Yeah, there's a double line of divots on the box part of this one going across. But yeah, look at this.
Yeah.
Look at these. It looks like somebody had a giant ice cream scoop.
Yeah.
And this is the other thing. These scoops are polished, right? The boxes themselves, They're polished to a very. It's hard to see because
what you're seeing is dust.
Yeah, everything's very dusty,
completely covered. We got to take some Windex next time we go.
Kyle's been saying we
need a roll of paper towels and some Windex when we go.
But they're so polished that they're reflective.
You can kind of see that actually.
Yeah, and you'll see it in some other ones too. But they're so polished that they're reflective, and the scoops are polished.
Huh.
Which is, that's difficult to, how are you polishing this? What method are you using, especially if it's a hand polishing, like the idea that they, you have some guy with some sandy grit and a cloth and he's just rubbing at it, forever. I don't know.
My life was dedicated to scoop number 5 in box A.
That would be about it too.
That's right. You'd spend your entire life polishing the scoop.
I'm telling you, the standard model has these ideas of like, yes, your entire life was dedicated to moving one giant block from the quarry to, the pyramid and placing it and whatever. And it was just
that was your life.
That was, every time the Nile flooded and you couldn't farm anymore, you went to the quarry and you worked at the quarry. And then when the flooding went down, you went back to and all throughout your life, you'd be cutting on this one block every time the Nile flooded. And then you would finally get that, you and your group of guys, you'd finally get that block out, and then one time when the Nile flooded, you got the block out, and then you'd float it down the Nile, and then you'd drag it to the pyramid.
And then you die.
And then you finally get it there, and you get it up to the first course, and then you died. And then the next guy would take over. But yeah, this is the way they tell the story.
So yeah,
it was an honor, by the way.
It was an honor to slave away for the pharaoh. So again, I'm just showing. I got pictures of multiple blocks. So Kyle is putting his hand on some scoops that go right to the edge here. You can see how
they're
just so.
And this also sort of shows you the scale. Look at the size of this lid.
Yeah.
Look at that divot they cut out of this one. Clearly, there was something here, something big here that they didn't want.
And why?
It seems like a lot of work, right? You've already got this beautiful shape. Why are you taking this huge chunk out of it? Because they don't care particularly about the outside of the boxes.
Yes. The insides of the boxes do not exhibit these types of things. Now, there's
some irregularities, but
there are some irregularities, and there's one interesting case where one of the inside bottom corners of the box is completely left in, but also polished.
Yeah.
So it's like this big triangular chunk that's still inside. It's strange.
There's some notches in the bottom of this one.
I think those are probably more modern.
Yeah, I think they're modern. This is prying. You can see how it's
modern. They're ancient, but whoever opened that box.
Yeah. So this one, they cut the entire front corner off of this.
Oh yeah.
But they did it in a very clean, smooth way, right? They still made it sort of prism-like.
Yeah.
But they, for whatever reason, this box doesn't go all the way out to the top here. They cut this entire corner off this side.
Yeah, they kind of even matched it up to the thickness over there on the right side.
It's really interesting. There's another picture of it from the other side.
Somebody illegally walked across that box.
You can see the footprints going across them.
Wasn't me, folks.
There's Kyle down next to one of the boxes. So you can walk beneath the lid, right?
Oh.
That shows you how tall the boxes are. This is the lid sticking off the top, and there's Kyle. We're both down in the... Not supposed to be here. Not supposed to be here, folks, but we're breaking the law.
That's not me.
You don't have a mask on. I don't recognize you.
So this is the one that they allow you to walk around because it's the only one that has writing on it.
Okay.
So they've built so you can see they've built a floor here. And you can understand this. So this wooden floor is raised up above the original floor, and the reason for that is to cut down on the dust. Like walking around on the original floor, it's so dusty. So this box is actually, it's made shorter by the height of the floor, but you can see the carving here on it.
And is that carving contemporary with the building of it?
Well, this is how they date the entire, this is how they date the whole thing and the construction of the boxes. Yeah. But I do have a picture, I think, in here of a closer picture of the carvings, and it's just the quality. You'll see it. It doesn't really line up with how beautiful the boxes themselves are. The carving is not very well done.
Does anyone know what the carving says?
It's no, I didn't remember getting a translation, but what's interesting is there's a bunch of empty cartouches in it.
Yeah, the idea is that the carving is a dedication, right? And there's cartouches, which are sort of an oval.
It's where you put the name of the pharaoh,
where the name of a pharaoh goes in. So the idea is that the priests were preparing this box to be dedicated to somebody, and maybe the idea that I got is that they may have actually been sort of a way selling this type of stuff. So
yeah.
There's a lot of alcoves inside this thing that are carved into the walls of the tunnels that they clearly were like dedicated. You can put your little plaque in there with your name on it, and you can be dedicated to the god and whatever.
Right. Give us a donation, and we'll
support the priesthood, and we will put your name on this box, and you will be forever remembered by the gods.
In here with these objects of the gods. That's
right.
What I think.
The boxes that the gods built.
Yeah. So this is an unfinished lid. It's not polished, sitting on the floor, and you can see the raised wooden floor. But this kind of gives you the scale. This guy's leaning against it. It's our buddy Mo.
What are all the little alcoves in the wall?
That's what I was talking about. You get your little votive plaque stuck in the wall here. None of them are here anymore.
Yes, Cave of the Gods with all the giant boxes built by the ancient gods. You can be here with them if you pay us a price and support the priesthood.
That's right.
But those aren't in every.
No.
Okay.
No, that's the standard story again. Like we don't really know. I think these are. I just don't know how much to trust these stories. A lot of it is just based on, other things, right?
Yeah.
You're basing it off of other findings. And it's like, okay, yeah, this looks similar to this other place where they did these dedications. So
this one looks like a copy. It's not the same material. It's not built the same way. It's in a different kind of rough alcove thing. It's
different chiseling.
Still big. It's got chisel marks on it. There's Kyle at the other end of it. Here he is standing on a box with no lid.
You can see how thick the walls of these boxes. I mean, it's incredible. So if they were taking divots out of the sides, 6 inches deep, you're still not even. Yeah. The integrity of the box is good to go.
Yeah. But this unfinished one, you can see it's got a scoop taken out of it right there. So this is one of the hallways that when you come down in here, there's these long hallways, and they had to drag these boxes down these hallways. And here is one still in the hallway. So you can see there's just not a lot of room, and the lid wouldn't fit.
And why do that?
Well, man. I don't know, but the idea here is, again, we're following along this idea of unfinished, right? Somebody had a project here. They cut these tunnels out. They had all these little alcoves, and they were bringing in these boxes.
But I mean, why make the hallway so you have to bring them in separately? You know what I mean?
Because it wasn't. See, again, this is where we run into this possibility that it wasn't hard for them to do it this way.
Yeah.
Like we might want a large hallway so that we could have a giant machine a huge forklift that could carry this box that weighs 70 tons down the hall. But they didn't need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they just vibrated it and then lightly pushed it along some dolomite stones. And
that's the other problem is this box is sitting on the floor.
There's nothing under it.
There's nothing under it. So how are you going to pick it back up?
Yeah.
If the idea is that, because the standard idea, they put them on wooden sleds and they were sliding them down the hallway. Well, there's no wooden sled beneath this box. Not even any fragments.
Now there's a wooden floor built around it, but in the literature, they've never found any fragments of wood or anything underneath this, you know, sticking out or whatever. So it's just sitting right on the bedrock.
Wow.
So I'm looking down the side of it. This is where you got to kind of squeeze past on the right there to get past the box.
Now, did they have to move that so people can get through? Is that where it originally was?
That's where it is.
Huh.
Move it to the side, Johnson, so we can get by.
Yeah.
That's when they set it down. It's like, make sure you leave it to the side.
Leave it off to the right so we can, off to the left so we can kind of get past it here. There's Kyle up on top of it, looking down in. I got a video of me walking up to it. Here we go. This is kind of trying to give you the scale, because again, this thing is huge. It's taller than me. So I walk up and I have to look up at the corner, at the upper edge. And then I go past it and then squeeze through. And Kyle's like, I got to get on the top of it right now.
I need to see what's inside this thing.
There we go.
Wow.
So yeah, again, unfinished. Clearly this project was in process. They were almost done. Most of the boxes are finished, polished, and in place. But this one of the last ones, is just left in the hallway. Like, again, they downed tools and never came back.
Which definitely speaks to the idea of a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Yes. And there are a number of empty alcoves, so it's they were not done dragging boxes down in there.
Right. And there's some boxes like Ben was talking about. We need to get, there's a couple of huge boxes that are just shoved off in a corner, like beautifully finished ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like they got it down in there and they were working on it and they decided for whatever reason that it didn't fit their whatever
There
criteria.
might be a crack in it.
Yeah, whatever their criteria were. So they just jammed it into its own little back tunnel.
Like they dug a little just extra alcove and just shoved it in there.
Yeah. And another thing you notice when you're walking around in here is that there's metal gates keeping you from going to certain areas. So there's more that we didn't see that we're hoping to get to next time we go out here, out to Egypt. So this is a picture back again at the box that with the carvings on it. So you can see that most of it's just a pattern. And this is the pattern that they call the false door. This here. But Kyle has pointed out, and I agree, that it kind of actually looks more like you're looking down a hallway.
Oh yeah.
Well, when you go into the temples, into these in Egypt, and you look, they set these gigantic doorways up, and then there's another one further away, and another one further away, and another one further away. And so when you stand at the end and you look down, this is what it looks like. You just see these rectangles that are like they keep decreasing in size symmetrically.
Yeah.
I actually have a photo of that.
But let's see, is the next picture? Yeah, so you can kind of see the lines aren't, they're not too great. Kind of wobbly. It looks like
Stippling.
Yeah, like they just kind of scratched this in. Now they were trying to do a good job, but they couldn't.
They had a little pointy chisel and a hammer. And just ding, ding, ding.
The material is just too hard, and it's not really that great of quality. It's pretty rough, and it's cut through the polish, on the outside of the box. So it just doesn't seem. It just doesn't seem contemporary with the actual making of the box itself.
Right.
Here's another, you can see how rough these lines are. They were trying to make it straight, but they just couldn't quite manage it.
Now this was just one box.
Yeah, this is the only box that has these kinds of markings on it. And it just clearly looks like somebody scratched this in way after.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty rough. Look at that. Couldn't even keep the line going.
Oh, he was sick that day.
Come on, Johns. What's the deal, buddy? So this is same box. I'm just showing the underside of the lid because I wanted to get a picture of the polish, so you can actually see the back wall being reflected on the underside of the lid. It's so polished. Here, this dark area right here is a reflection of this crack.
Oh yeah, wow.
So it's so amazing. This material, this diorite, which is a kind of very hard, dark crystalline granite, has been polished to like the same level of what we would get as a marble or a granite countertop, except that our countertops are usually they do polish them, but they also coat them in a kind of, what is that stuff? They give it a coat to give it a nice, like the modern countertops. There's no coat on this. It's just polished.
Yeah.
There's Kyle checking it with a laser, seeing if it's actually flat.
And was it?
Mostly. There was a very slight
deviation.
Yeah, there are slight deviations.
One thing I learned, I've seen, there's a lot of talk online about how precisely the interiors of these boxes are made, and it is true in certain respects, but there are also very obvious deviations from perfect precision that are noticeable with lasers or even to the naked eye in some cases, and they look purposeful. Like, you can tell that when they achieved a flat surface, it's perfect. And then suddenly there's this big divot in it, that I say big, it's not like on the outsides of the lids, but there would be a place where it's just like, okay, that clearly
a noticeable indent,
a noticeable indentation,
but it's like scooped out.
Yes. So yes, I've puzzled about this. Like, the interiors obviously were where the finest work was done, no question about that. There are very high degrees of precision when it comes to the right angles of the corners and the parallel walls of the boxes, but over the entire surface there are deviations in certain places, and it's just, and like I said, in the one there's like an entire corner that's just left in.
Right.
So there, and it's like, obviously they intended to not take that corner out. I mean, it's so huge. It's like, it's got to be, 10 inches square. Well, it's more triangular, 10-inch triangle in the corner. And that's not an accident. That's totally on purpose. So it looks purposeful. I don't know how else to describe it.
And it's just such a fascinating thing to think about. Why would you care more about the quality of the interior surface of a coffin if that's what these were supposed to be? Because that the standard model story is that they buried the ritualistically slaughtered Apis bull into these things. But they clearly didn't care as much about the outside as they did the inside of these boxes when they were making them.
Were bull bones ever found?
There were bull bones found in a different place, in a wooden box. Not in any of these. But it's like the highest quality work is the inside surfaces that would never be seen by anyone, And
when you look at, like, King Tut's tomb and stuff, the really high quality stuff, because he was in a sarcophagus, and there was, they have the multiple wooden layers with gold inlays and all this stuff, and it was always outside.
On the outside.
The outside. Then you pull that, you take that piece of wood apart, and then there's a smaller sarcophagus piece of wood in the shape of a being and whatever, with all this inlaid stuff on the outside. So it just,
it's weird.
It flies in the face of that tradition.
Yeah.
So now that we've looked at all the stuff in Egypt, let's take a quick trip and look at some stuff around the world. This is Peru. This is Ollantaytambo, the Temple of the Sun. And again, do you recognize these scoopy marks now going up and down these stones? This is andesite.
Oh, it's andesite.
Andesite, yeah. So you can kind of see the same pattern, this recognizable
look at that giant
tool
nubs.
marks.
Did they also have these little round balls?
Great question. Where are the pounding stones?
They took them all to Egypt after they were done with this place.
There's more from Ollantaytambo. This is more along the lines of unfinished. There's just gigantic, massive blocks lying around that seem to have been in the process of being moved to be placed, and just it was never completed.
These are some like serious nubs.
Super nubs. Yeah.
This is before they realized they could use smaller nubs. Everything in technology gets smaller over time. The nubs obviously shrink too.
More in Peru.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that these walls down here, like, so they were working their way up these terraces. These look complete. They've been repaired, more modern. This is more modern repairs probably on the tops here, but when you get all the way up to the top here, you see blocks lying around.
Mm-hmm.
And notice where the nubs are around this portal. You see a whole bunch of nubs in the blocks near the entry, or the whatever this doorway through the wall. The blocks are much larger, and there's nubs all over them around the doorway. Very interesting. So more scoop-like marks. This is also in Peru. I got these pictures from Ben, by the way, from Uncharted X. So you see this strange pattern. Now this is just an outcrop of rock. It isn't a block, I'm pretty sure.
But very indicative of a quarry.
Yeah.
Right? Like you see these strange patterns in the leftover, sort of not the work, not the stuff you're taking, but
there's one there, and you can see
you're leaving.
A line of scoopy marks across here, and then some long ones here. Yeah, see this?
Wow. And it looks exactly like the stuff in Egypt.
Yeah. Here's more in Peru. This is near the Chulpa towers, the Silistani stuff, the big circular towers.
I mean, it just looks just like the Osirion.
Yeah, it's Osirion. I don't know what this stone is, but it's, this is probably another very hard stone. It looks volcanic. These kind of pockets in it, but again, you see, it looks like they were like the puffiness on these blocks is on the top layer. See it?
Yeah,
across the top. So this may give us an indication of how they
did the courses.
How they did the courses, right? You stack the blocks up, and it's sort of irregular up here, and then you begin to smooth it out flatten it for the next set of blocks.
Yeah.
More unfinished. This block is this is one of the sleeping stones, they call them. It's just sitting here at the base of the mountain. Like they probably brought it from over here somewhere, and they're going to bring it across the valley and up to wherever it was going, someplace way up high, and it's just sitting in the road.
I've just always been so curious about.
No one's ever moved it.
Like what type of air fresheners they use over in Peru, because that thing.
Kyle wants to know where they got this air freshener.
How does that thing smell?
Are you sure it's an air freshener or not just?
I mean, that's just me. It looks like it could be an air freshener.
It could. That's what I thought at first too. But I mean, maybe it's just a decoration and we can't see the design on it.
God. I gotta take these pictures out.
Sorry, guys.
You guys are both like, what kind of air freshener is that?
I mean,
look at this block, guys. Right here.
Look at that air freshener.
Yeah, what is that? Why has it got teeth?
It looks pretty saw bladey.
Either that or it's like an amoeba-like thing with little tentacles starting to form out of it.
I'm pretty sure it's some kind of that's got a guy on it doing something, right? It's like I don't know.
Yeah, see, it's a design. It's not an air freshener. Well, I mean,
showing you how to create the great smells.
With the plastic thing around it, you probably cut the plastic thing and the smell starts coming out.
Right.
Maybe
the corpse stench.
You're right. It's not an air freshener. That's why it's covered in plastic. They're like, don't expose that thing to the air.
This is the real mystery. What's that?
So Easter Island. Again, unfinished. Left in the quarry.
Do you have marks there too?
Yeah, there are some indications of scoops. Look at the size of this guy.
Yeah, I know.
This thing is just gigantic. So again, like the Unfinished Obelisk, you have this, the biggest one they ever made is still in the quarry.
Yeah.
Now this really kind of messes up my theory about the, they're going to cut away a whole bunch of rock from the obelisk and it'll be more of a normal size because this guy already has a face.
They have the faces already.
Yeah.
So they clearly weren't doing that exact method, at least with the face of this guy. And probably if I don't know how the proportions work for the body, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. Like they're working on finished work while it's still in the quarry, which is, and so the question I have about this is that finishing work on the face, was that done later by later people that were...
That's, very possible. That the face was cut out by later people.
Like maybe it was more roughly done. I don't know. It's evidence against the idea.
Now look at this.
I wouldn't say it's evidence against the idea. It's just, these are two, who knows what the time period is between these things and how much the culture and technology may have changed.
True.
Yeah. So these pictures aren't the greatest quality, but you can kind of see there's some scoop patterns here.
Yeah.
And the thing I really like about this.
Yes. Oh, yeah. All right. Kyle pointed this out initially, that there's this big divot above the nose.
Oh, yeah.
Which to me gives you an indication of like the space needed for the tool to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's just a guy in there and he's pounding away, then maybe like why do you need that big divot?
Yeah. It's a little strange if it's all being hand done.
But you could see that like where the chin is and where the forehead is, it's about the same distance.
Yeah.
So, it'd be nice to go there and walk on that and see, it's like, do I need this space above my head? Or is this indication of a tool?
Where are these guys pounding stones? Did they have pounding stones? All right, Balbec. Again, with the unfinished, I know you know Balbec. This is the famous stone of the south. Huge block in the quarry, but they've dug out these other ones below it that are even larger.
It's like the technology was advancing, and then you have a cataclysm, and then you just have the remnants of that technology on the other side that slowly gets lost.
Yeah, and again, the story with this block is similar to what's said about the Unfinished Obelisk, that that there was either a flaw or something, or it was too big to move, and so they just left it here. But that's just silly. You did all this work, and you've got this completely cut out block with all these. Why don't you chop it into smaller pieces? You still need smaller blocks over there at Balbec.
Right.
They just left it here. It just seems ridiculous. It seems like that whoever was actually doing this work never completed what they were trying to do, that they didn't come back, and continue the work.
Yeah.
There's another picture of it. I love this image for scale. These people here show you that, look at this thing.
Yeah.
And the one
again, that's something today we'd have a very hard time moving.
Oh yeah. And this thing is stacked on this other block.
Yeah.
It's completely cut away from it. It's stacked up there.
It was not too heavy to move.
Right. It wasn't too heavy for them to move. They stacked it up.
One. That's to me, that's like, all right, we've cut these really nice blocks out, stack them up over there.
Right. Get them out of the way in preparation for them to be moved over to the building site. And it didn't happen.
And why build any of this stuff at all?
There is a block that's closer to the site of Balbec that is very massive, and it's been quarried.
This one.
Yes.
God damn.
And you can see that people had been cutting pieces out of it.
Yeah.
Quarrying it for smaller pieces, right? These are probably being prepared to make much smaller blocks. Still big, but much smaller blocks. But yeah, this thing is gigantic, and it was on. This one was in the process of being moved, and it was put down here, and never
not
came back
on
to
a
it.
road, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, just
kind of
like
in the mountains.
No road, just.
Yeah, this is not a place where you can imagine, rolling it on some logs.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, over that cliff.
Right. Just kind of roll it up this cliff here.
Alien levitation beams.
Yeah.
And giants working together.
All right, China.
Oh.
This is the Yangshan Quarry. So it's hard to get good, solid information about this place, but it's got a lot of the qualities of some of the stuff we looked at, and I just want to show it because of this thing is attached to the bedrock, but it has nubs on it. So this is one of, sometimes we see these nubs sticking out of things that aren't, they're still part of the mountain, and you're like, wait a minute, are those really for lifting? They could have other purposes.
Could have been carved into gargoyles.
But look at this massive thing right here. This gigantic thing, and I've got some other ones that show you the scale. So here's some people next to these things.
Wow.
So was anybody really going to? Were they thinking they were going to move this? It's tough to. I wonder if this was a quarry or this was in the process of becoming a rock cut temple or something.
Oh yeah.
But they call it a quarry. And the idea that the story...
Well, I mean, it can be both.
It can turn into a quarry, yeah.
It can be both. Like, you're quarrying stone, and then you turn the quarry into a rock-cut temple.
Yeah.
I mean,
so the story that I've read, I don't know if this is true, but the story that I've read was that that an emperor or something wanted a monument built in a nearby city or town, and they came out here and started cutting these. There's 3 pieces, basically, of the monument. There's the tall... this thing which would have been the pillar part, the tall part, and then there's a base, and then there's another piece. So basically 3 parts, and they were going to take them out of here and bring them over to the city and set up this monument in the square, and they got so far and they realized it's way too big, so they made a much smaller one. And you can see it in the city. I should go find a picture of the small one in the town, but it kind of looks the same, like this is the base of it, I think, and this is the tall piece, but it's really small. So when you see this, you're like, wait a minute. So they were cutting these and they got this far and realized we can't move this.
Right.
It's too big. Let's make one that's, 20 or 30 feet tall in total. I don't buy this story. I think that the monument that's in the town is actually like a, like a copy of this stuff.
Yeah.
Cut by the gods, Another picture of one of the pieces. Look at this thing.
Wow.
Was somebody planning on look at that. Was somebody planning on moving this?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And it's really interesting, all the features here. These actually go all the way through this thing.
Yeah, I mean, that looks like a temple.
Yeah. These go all the way through.
The backside goes all the way through.
It goes all the way through to the other side of this gigantic thing here. And then there are these little weird, I don't know what they are, altars or platforms that look like they meant to be pillars, but they don't actually go up and support the bottom of this thing.
It's because it doesn't need it.
But look at that. These holes go all the way through this thing.
Wow.
So you can see through to the other side. And look at this person standing over here. Again, the scale is just really tough to, this is huge. There's that other piece, the one we saw the person walking on top of with the umbrella. These also go all the way through it.
I mean, I guess that makes sense if you're going to eventually remove. What was that?
You see scoop? It looks like scoop patterns on this. It's harder to see, but there might be vertical patterns on this.
If you look at it like that, okay, so maybe that was meant to be just what we're seeing, but also, if they were going to move them, they leave these last pieces and then slide something under it that they're going to move it on, and then cut those pieces out.
A giant 3-pronged forklift.
Yeah.
Yes. I totally agree with that. So yeah, this is looking at, you can see underneath that huge long piece, it actually it's not supported. And there are these weird, what are these?
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah. And so it's completely cut away from the back wall. They've turned it into this square block or whatever. It's supported at one end and the other end, but all the way along the bottom, you've got this, this series of strange things. So yeah, all over the world, you can find evidence of this interesting tooling, the scoop cuts, megalithic stones, fine fitted blocks, sometimes enormous things, and then also
extremely hard stones.
An extremely hard stone, and then also the evidence that there's a lot of this kind of work that didn't get completed.
Yeah.
Like all over the world, people were working on these projects and something happened and they put their tools down and they never came back to the job. So that's it.
That's all?
That's it.
That's one hell of a presentation.
What do you mean that's all?
There's more.
Oh, there's more. Okay, good. Let's keep going.
That's it for today.
Oh, all right. That was fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, the scoop marks, especially being all over the world, was very interesting.
So Russ doesn't like to speculate too much about the tools and about all the stuff. The idea, the whole thing is
don't ask me about the tools.
I'm the speculator, and I know you mentioned early on the idea of possibly geopolymer. I'm not sure if you were going there. But you were talking about...
Well, you said they were
softening the stone.
Yeah.
You mentioned the possibility of that being sort of like concrete blocks. So I would like to point out that now, not specifically about softening the stone, but the idea of geopolymer. It's clear that this stuff is not geopolymer when you can go to the quarry site.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And you're looking at the unfinished obelisk or the Moai statue or the Balbec blocks or whatever, where they were being cut out of the bedrock. That's the clearest evidence. There is better evidence or other evidence for against geopolymers in the form of the crystalline structure, the presence of
macrofossils.
Yeah, fossils.
Yeah, what I'm thinking more like is if they could vibrate the stone at a certain frequency, you could maybe mold it, or even that's when they start shaving the stuff off because you can make it softer temporarily.
Yep.
You're not it is what the type of stone we think it is. It's just they have a method of making it temporarily softer.
Yes. Yeah, if at the working edge of the tool tip, it could
somehow
soften the stone. Yeah.
Yeah. So these things, like as far as how the tools work and removing the stone. Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said about the sonic resonance, right? You get these specific frequencies of vibration. You have a specific hardness of tool. It's been demonstrated with sonic drilling and other things, and I think that sonic drilling can be converted to something more like sonic chiseling, something like that, sonic abrasion.
Right.
That you could achieve these things at fairly high rates of removal and without a lot of wear and tear, because you can sonic drill through quartz with copper tubes. So there is a lot of talk about the use of copper in ancient Egypt, and so if they had some way to create a ultrasonic vibration into a copper chisel, then maybe they could. Then maybe they were removing granite with copper, and a slurry, because the other thing about sonic drilling is that you're using a slurry. So you're using actually a much harder material that is ground into fine grains in water, and you're running that down the copper chisel. And the copper chisel or the copper tube, its job is to transmit the mechanical vibration to the slurry, and the slurry does the cutting action. So you lose a lot less copper in the process.
Yeah, of course, that's also our technology. They may have come up with something completely different.
They may have. I'm just talking about what we know of today. Like you can cut through quartz, for example, with copper.
And one of the things
but you're using a slurry with a much harder material.
One of the things that I meant to point out, we're looking at those areas, like for example in the Osirion, where they were clearly somebody was flattening and smoothing out the wall, and they didn't finish.
Mm-hmm.
In that place, and when you're in the Valley Temple, you can see this in the granite, that there's these... The granite has, like I said, it's large grain, so it has, thumb-sized pieces of quartz in it.
Big chunks of quartz.
And if you were hammering away at that with a pounding stone or a chisel of some kind or whatever, when you hit those pieces of quartz, they're going to pop them out of there. But instead, they've been flattened.
Yes. There's another...
They've been flattened to fit the edge or the flatness of the wall. So you can't do that without... It seems like you're using some other kind of method.
You have to actually be cutting that quartz.
Yeah.
That small, tiny piece of quartz, you have to cut that may be being held in with mica and feldspar to the rest of the granite. So are you going to split the piece of quartz, or are you going to break it away from where it's fused to the feldspar and the mica? It's more likely you're going to break it away.
You're going to break it out of there, and it leaves a hole.
There is an obelisk in...
Tanis
that is made of a stone that's like a conglomerate. It's so wild and crazy. It's like it's got flint inclusions in it. It's got quartz. It's got all these and they're large chunks,
pebble shaped. Big.
They're the size of they're the size of golf balls in some cases, and even bigger. And yet they are flattened. Perfectly within the matrix of the other softer stones. So whatever tool they were using to cut through the softer stone and didn't hammer against a hard stone and knock it out, but actually is just as easily and smoothly cut through that incredibly hard, solid quartz or solid flint, where flint breaks like glass, and it didn't break it like glass. It flattened it. I mean, it just cut it smooth.
So consider too, when we were talking about dust, if you could soften a rock, you might be able to make it create a lot less dust.
You can cut down on the dust problem.
Yeah, that's true. Then you'd be mud, old boy. I don't know. I don't know how it could be done, but it could have been done.
Well, it's obviously been done. I mean, they built these things.
Well, the softening of it. I mean, the idea of like sort of softening it, and when I think of that, I think of like sort of making it more like a little bit like clay, where you could manipulate it.
It's just hard to imagine really with things like granite, because granite is made up of like multiple different materials, all of which have very different properties, hardnesses, and can you soften granite so that the quartz also gets soft along with the feldspar and the mica?
I don't know. Without the feldspar sort of melting out of there.
It's really tough to think of, in the way, and granite forms under it's like slowly cooling under a lot of pressure, right? So that it gets these big crystals in it and stuff. So it's like, can you turn it into a soft material in normal above ground pressure and then have it cool and reform back the way it was? It's hard to imagine.
Soft is really also just it's relative.
Relative.
Right? It's relative. So when we say, well, you soften the material, well, or are we just talking about hardening something else and making it much like using other forces to create something that is much harder?
But I guess if you could get granite to be as soft as a piece of oak, it would be a lot easier to work. It would not necessarily be soft, but
for sure.
Softer.
So here's the other thing. When you're looking at all this stuff, and like we're talking about the inside of the boxes, why would they do that? And you're looking at these other things, and it's like, what could they possibly use this for? I think that's a testament to how different their culture was, that we can't even come up with an idea of what these would be used for. Like it's like we're viewing reality in a completely different way.
Their priorities were so far removed from ours that we can't even imagine why they would go to this, to move these ridiculously large to
build in that style,
gigantic structures that have almost no empty space inside them. Compared to the amount of mass of stone, it's incredible.
Make perfect insides of boxes, and the outsides are just whatever.
Polish them, but you don't really care if it's got big divots,
I mean, I can't think of anything we do like that.
Well, the great thing about pointing that out is that it shows you that they cared much more about the interior of the box than the exterior.
Right.
And the things you can think of that we do that are like that are, for example, like an engine. The precision on the cylinders that the pistons go up and down in is much higher than the cast out exterior of the engine.
True.
Now it's got tool marks, and there's some flattened faces on it where even in a 1989 freaking 280Z, if they even made those in 89, has like some component that used to be on there in an earlier model is no longer there. So there's this flat face that's not even used. And, later people would be like, well, what is that for? Well, it was for the convenience of making it transferable to future models. They didn't bother changing the cast.
Right. But what I was trying to get at basically is that when you care more about the interior than the exterior, it implies some kind of machine, maybe.
Yeah. And a machine we obviously would have no concept of.
Right. Like what is it? I mean, what kind of a machine is a giant box, so it's, and there's other things about the Serapeum that are difficult to understand. They, that pattern that we talked about that they call a false door. There were large carved out of the same material as the box's false door panels on either side of each box in those alcoves. Most of them are gone now or busted, but Ben says there's a few of them left they're kind of lying around. Hopefully we can get in to see one.
Wait, there's what? Say that again?
So think of like two very large slabs of stone of the same material made from the boxes that are on either side of the long sides of the box that are facing the boxes. Like think of tombstones standing up on either side of the box.
With the false door pattern
but
cut
they're
into
up
them.
Against the wall, but they have this false door sort of repeating, getting smaller and smaller rectangle pattern carved deeply into them.
Huh.
Now, I haven't seen them, and I'm not sure if those carvings are polished and to the same quality, but we're hoping to get to see them because they are an element that was in each of the alcoves that contained boxes
of that kind of
and
box.
They've all been quarried.
Yep.
Removed for granite, I guess.
There's some fragments remaining in there. We just didn't get to see them last time.
So the thing that's interesting about going to Egypt and, getting a tour and being led around and shown stuff, it's like when you start to look at things at this level of like the difficulty of manipulating this stone and moving it around, not every place that you go is going to exhibit these types of characteristics.
Sure.
And yet you might go to a temple that's made of sandstone and it's something that's completely imaginable to be done using the methods that the standard model has, like, ropes and
especially if it's like New Kingdom when they were getting close, they had iron and
sandstone is much easier to manipulate. And yet you'll go into a temple and you'll get it all the way into the back, and then like at the very back in the main like sort of alcove that the whole thing is sort of designed around is this gigantic granite artifact that's broken but has incredibly precise flat faces on it.
Like the whole temple is built that thing.
That's what it looks like. It's like they built this gigantic temple and they stuck this artifact in there. To them, it was an artifact.
Yeah.
Of this much harder material, a giant piece, and it's maybe broken. And it's
it's ancient, fractured, partially destroyed, but you still see remnants of precise flat surfaces, very sharp corners, but they're intricate, perfect curves that follow each other.
But they can be inconspicuous.
Yeah.
To like a traditional tour, which is taking you around and showing you the carvings on the walls and telling you about the kings and this and that or whatever. And so when you look at it, when you go to ancient Egypt with this mindset of like, okay, here's the difficulty, here's the precision type of work, and going to the places that have these artifacts, it's quite mind-blowing to see how they're exhibited in so many places. And in some cases, just they're in really off the beaten path places that no one goes to.
Yeah. We were joking when we were there that you could tell our tour, because everybody else, all the other tourists are there looking at the columns and looking at the carvings, and we're all surrounding some crumbled granite.
Broken piece of granite on the ground in the corner.
Looking at one part of it that still remains that has this perfectly flat 3-dimensional corner, and we're just like, oh my God.
And there's guys like busting out precision straight edges and lasers and shit. It was funny. It was great.
All right. Well, thank you for doing this. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And yes, we'll have you back hopefully soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Thanks,
we're going back to Egypt in November, so
okay, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah,
maybe we'll come back with some more ideas.
We'll come back with some new material and more pictures and more ideas.
And where can people find you guys otherwise?
Brothers of the Serpent is the name of our podcast. We are mostly an audio show, but you can find us on YouTube if you want. But other than that, search Brothers of the Serpent in your podcast app or Spotify or whatever. We also have a website, brothersoftheserpent.com.
And I have a band, a rock band.
Oh, yeah.
We just released an album, $50dynasty.com. The whole album's there. It's free. You can download it.
It's excellent.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's long time, and it's
is it up on Bandcamp yet?
Nope, didn't put it on Bandcamp, but it's there for download, on the website, and also you can find it on streaming platforms everywhere.
All right. Well, thank you guys. This has been awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much, buddy.
Good night.
You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.